Ordinarily, I would sit, but I see that the professor has sat to the left, to my left. That's an ideologically impermissible. But since it's his book launch, I will not contest. What I want us to do is I want us to run a tight ship, a very tight ship. And in running this tight ship, I'd like to appeal to my panel, other than Professor Mutambara, who I will introduce shortly. What is that thing that the late Robert Mugabe used to say, Walter, by the powers vested in me? And I have to correct it because everyone in my clan says by the powers invested in me, even if there's no investment. By the powers vested in me, other panelists, so that we respect people's ability to interact, we will give you 3 minutes each. Around 3 minutes, you start winding down. Please, we do know that we have people who have recently announced that they have aspirations for an office that Mzukuru wangu there, Patrick Zhuwao, once said there was no vacancy. So I need to interrogate. First, let me give disclaimers. I am Brian Tamuka Kagoro. I am privileged to be here to launch Professor Mutambara's third book. Professor Mutambara, as you know, is the director and full professor of IFK at the University of Johannesburg, and is Zimbabwe's former deputy prime minister, a distinguished academic, and a passionate Pan-Africanist. I do not wish to take away from his presentation. I learned many years in my tours of Africa that if the introduction is made too long, it is an excuse for very shallow content to follow. But if the introduction of the speaker is short, that means you must expect fireworks. The disclaimer is that this is not a political meeting. It's a meeting about politics. So for those of you who are afraid or who are hopeful that there will be an announcement of a new political party at this gathering, that's not why we are here, number one. This is also not a meeting about decrying what's wrong. The title of the book suggests that the conversation is about finding solutions. We also want you to get to understand the author a little bit more. But before I do that, I would invite you to look at he's constantly teasing me at the front desk. He has 5 books. So he keeps saying, Kagoro, I have 5 books, where is yours? And I keep telling him that I'm a true African, I'm following oral tradition. What do I say? So what we'll do in running through this program, I'll invite Professor Mutambara to come and give you a snapshot, an overview of what is this book about. Those of you who are familiar with the first 2 volumes, I also, you will of course understand what the 3rd volume is about. Those of you who were not here for the first 2 launches or in Zimbabwe, at least this is an opportunity for you to understand. I want to remind you that knowledge is scarce. So since my brother Arthur has produced it in large volumes, the books are available for you to take home. The poster of the meeting was very clear. In case it's 500 for the hardback and 400 for the softback. So that at least as we interact, you also show your support and solidarity by purchasing. You are free to purchase the earlier volumes. There are few copies, so the sooner you do it, the better. We are joined by an eminent panel. I'm going to introduce them by first name afterwards. But for now, it's useful for you to know who I have. That will come after Professor Mutambara. I will allow Professor Mutambara to make the presentation because it is his day. Then I'll come and tell you who the other, for today, gentlemen and ladies, who the other lesser mortals. These are rock stars, and so I mean not disrespect. As I told you, they come in all shades and shapes, and I'll tell you, highly accomplished. But for today, I want you to accept that you are playing a subordinate role, and you must not seek to outshine either myself or the professor. If you do that, I'll switch off your mic. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a happy occasion, so if you are going to make comments, respond to someone, I invite you to eschew the tendency that has grown in our region, that of toxic wastefulness. This evening is not an evening for toxicity, it's an evening for celebration. It's an evening to discuss solutions in a pointed way. And this does not mean that you cannot criticize, it simply means that after you've done the critique, you must be propositional. And Professor Mutambara, like me, I don't know Trevor, I saw Professor Trevor there, my friend. I used to tease them that the only thing left of the Zimbabwean and South African left are leftovers. You can defend if you disagree. So Professor Mutambara, you'll come, take your time, and then I'll come back and introduce the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, a pom-pom for... The reason why I called him professor is because, as you know, he's a traditional chief as well. And when you combine academia and traditional chiefdomship, you may have a problem of autocracy. So today we'll keep him at professor so that I can manage him. Otherwise, it's impossible to manage the chief.
Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you very much for coming. We are talking about In Search of the Zimbabwean Dream. Now, the problems we seek to address in this book are prevalent across the continent. So, in fact, we are talking about In Search of the African Dream. The problems we seek to solve in this book are prevalent across the Global South. Therefore, we are in pursuit of the Global South ambition. And we are also sick and tired of being sick and tired of describing problems. We want to concentrate on solutions. We want to be propositional. And so the subtitle of the book is Ideas and Solutions. Ideas and Solutions. And so that's why we are here today. And the books are volume 1, 2, and 3. And the key issue here is we are saying, why don't we write? Documentation is divine. These books, the 1, 2, 3, are the documentation of my thoughts, ideas, and experiences over the past 40 years, from 1983 to 2023, with selected autobiographical material to give context to the thoughts and ideas. Volume 1, which we launched here, was this one. And then volume 2, again, we launched here, was this one. And today, we are on ideas and solutions. Starting from 2009 to 2023. That's what we're working on in this volume. What is the focus? We are saying thought leadership. What do we mean when we say thought leadership? Intellectual influence through innovative and pioneering thinking. We're very ambitious. We are saying, why can't we use ideas to improve our material conditions? Why can't we use intellectual influence to bring about change in society? So by definition, thought leadership is the intellectual influence through innovative thinking and pioneering thinking. Why is this important? There's a paradox, which was popularized by the chairman here today. Those with power or influence have neither ideas nor solutions. People like Brian and Sipho, lots of ideas, lots of solutions, but no power, no influence. On the other hand, there are some who are very powerful, running countries, power and influence, but zero content, zero ideas and zero solutions. Well, our charge is how can we work together so we can bring ideas and solutions on one end, and power and influence together. So ideas and solutions can be used to create a difference. That's our mandate. We want a reading and writing culture. Documentation is divine. We must have both academic excellence and social responsibility. We must produce and articulate alternative forms of knowledge and ideologies, propel the struggle of the ruled and the oppressed, be producers of our own history, be the articulators of alternative narratives. He or she who defines a people controls that people. We must define ourselves. We must write our own history. And why are we worried? Most of our business leaders, Kuseni is here, top bowler in the business environment. Business leaders are not writing, academic leaders are not writing, and political leaders are not writing. Why can't we encourage our change makers to make a difference? Advocate Omphemetse, Mooki, Kasukuwere, all those years in government. Where is your book? Shame on you, Kasukuwere and Robert Mugabe. We must write. That's what we're saying, and I'm trying to walk the talk here. And Zhuwao, I can see you there, 0 book there. Every successful civilization has had a reading culture and a writing culture. Every successful civilization has had documentation. And as Africans, we also have something to say. When I say, I am because we are because I am because you are because I am. That is wisdom. That is a philosophical disposition of the African. How are we utilizing Ubuntu in the academy? How are we utilizing Ubuntu in business, in politics? Are we writing and teaching the Japanese? There's nothing in Japan like Ubuntu, not in America, not in Europe. So as Africans, let us also push our thoughts and teach the world. We, as Africans, believe in collective humanity. We believe in shared dignity. We believe in collective success. We are saying it's more important for us, for the community to do well, than for the individual to be a superstar. It's more important for us, for our countries to do well, as opposed to the individual doing well. So emphasis is on the collective, shared dignity, collective humanity. Why don't we teach the world about these philosophies and also use them in our own environments? The book is being launched within the context of serious problems in Zimbabwe. Low productivity, low production, currency crisis, many, many problems. And recently, there have been some even more devastating issues. You have read about the gold mafia. You have read about Zhuwao Moti, the businessman from South Africa who paid our vice president, our president money, and also a judge to sanitize the coup. You have read about Bona's 21 farms. My book helps you to understand these problems, explain to you why they do okay, and why and how you can solve them. The recited looting skill, the SI, which was meant for looting, and the overpriced helicopters, overpriced and illegally procured. These challenges are occurring in Zimbabwe. In my book, I seek to give you a context. I seek to help you understand why they do okay and what you can do to solve them. And for example, when you look at Bona's 21 farms. Now, if Bona has 21 farms, how about the 2 sons? How many do they have? Okay, let's just be very conservative and say President Mugabe had 40 farms, very conservatively. Now, if President Mugabe had 40 farms, how about his deputies? How about his ministers? How about his generals? How about his judges? Are you telling me that President Mugabe had 40 farms and the vice had 1, the minister 1, the judge 1? Are you that naive? In a corrupt system, if the top guy, top woman has 40, those second in command who have 15, those who are ministers who have 5, the judges who have 4. We must interrogate and find the meaning of this. And I'll come back to those farms later on in our discussion. I seek to get solutions to the problems of Zimbabwe. For example, around the currency, we need reserves to back the currency. We need fiscal consolidation. We need productivity and production. We need to ring-fence savings. You know, it's very saddening to find a headmaster who was working for 50 years who can't afford a meal now, because their savings were wiped out by inflation. What can we do to protect the savings? He's 90, she's 90. She can't go and work and hustle like you can. She gave the country 50 years, but she can't afford a meal today. What can we do to ring-fence savings and deposits to minimize the distortion of value? What can we do to build confidence and trust in the banking sector? That's what we are seeking to do in this book. Of course, in Zimbabwe, we have a nagging political crisis coming from the coup d'etat. A coup d'etat is never a proper foundation to develop a democracy. And also, the election in 2018 was problematic. So there's a legitimacy challenge in the country. And right now, we're going towards elections. The voters' roll is in shambles. The voters' roll is not accessible to the opposition. The opposition leaders, Scala and Garuvume, are in prison. There are no political reforms. And of course, on the 31st of May, the Patriotic Bill was passed in Parliament, which means it will be very difficult for people to express their views when it becomes an act after going through Senate and being signed by the President. How can we have a free and fair election in Zimbabwe within the context of these problems? We seek to get solutions to these issues. What needs to be done? Chairman Kagoro, Zimbabweans must have a shared economic vision where we want to be as a country. We must be very clear on the drivers of good governance. We must be very clear on how we can bring about legitimacy. We must be very clear on how to build macroeconomic stability. We must work towards economic transformation. We must embrace the fourth industrial revolution. Solutions, solutions, solutions. That's what we seek to do in this book. We want a peaceful, democratic, and prosperous nation in Zimbabwe. There's no second republic in Zimbabwe. There's no new dispensation in Zimbabwe. A new dispensation is earned, not declared. To get to the second republic, to get to a new dispensation, we've got to work together, have a national vision, have a national strategy. So we are in the first republic in Zimbabwe. Mugabe was a system. In 2017, the system was not broken. Mnangagwa is a continuation of the bankruptcy of Robert Mugabe. There's no change in Zimbabwe. There's no second republic. There's no new dispensation in Zimbabwe. We must have a shared national vision. Where do you want Zimbabwe to be in the year 2050? Paint a picture. Once you have done that, then you come up with the strategy, the game plan, to take ourselves from where we are in the valley to the house on the top of the hill. That's what we call strategy. And after that, execution, execution, execution. An implementation matrix. Who's going to do what? When are they doing it? Where are the resources going to come from? How are you going to measure success? What are the milestones? We want a framework like this in Zimbabwe, a shared national vision across the political divide, and then a strategy, a game plan to take us to the promised land. In addition to that, we must have a national brand. Minister Mzembi is here. He and I worked on this idea of building a hexagon where our country is competitive in those 5 areas. We must, as Zimbabweans, be very clear on the definition of a competitive Zimbabwe, in particular around investment. We must develop Zimbabwe's reputation in order to improve the country's global competitiveness, establishing a competitive identity. These are the solutions we seek in Zimbabwe. We are sick and tired of just describing the problems, condemning people. We must be propositional. We must be proactive and come up with solutions in our country. That's why we are emphasizing ideas and solutions. It's not enough to criticize. It's not enough to describe problems. Let us develop solutions. The book is written in a modular fashion. I know it's very intimidating, but you can just go to any section and read and understand. It's written in emoji. Just go to the table of contents, look at what you want to look at, and read. The beginning is a rocky start to the GNU, and then grappling with the national agenda, the constitution, political reforms, and the economy. We failed on political reforms. We succeeded on the constitution, we succeeded on the economy. But on political reforms, guilt is charged. There are also elements there on Mugabe. I was very lucky to spend a lot of time with Mugabe. I didn't sell out Kagoro, I didn't sell out. We're just close. Why were we close? 4 things. Robert Mugabe was an Anglophile. I went to Oxford. So he liked me because I went to Oxford, because I was an Anglophile. Secondly, Mugabe was fond of education. I have a PhD from Oxford. So Mugabe was overly impressed. And so we got along. Third, I'm a history buff. I love history. So I used to ask him, come, President, tell me about Joshua Ngomo. Tell me about Chitepo. Tell me about Tongogara. Tell me about Ndabaningisitole. And Mugabe used to sing. And that was the basis of our chemistry. And number 4, I was very principled. If it's a no, it's a no, and I don't change when I get outside the meeting. If it's a yes, I don't change when I get outside the meeting. Some of your friends, Kagoro, would discuss with Mugabe, agree, and then go and change. He hated that. This soldier never changed. And so we got along with Mugabe because he knew with Mutambara, you know where you stand. With Kagoro's friends, you don't know where you stand. So that was the basis of our friendship. And I managed to get a lot of interesting material. His views on Gukura Hundi, which are not shared publicly right now. His views on Chitepo. His views on the land reform program. His views on Ndabaningisitole. You'll be surprised. His views on Tegere. You'll be buy my book so you can get all those insights. What are some of the running themes in the book? Pan-Africanism is a major theme. Regional integration is a major theme. African agency is a major theme. The discipline of gratitude. Grateful people are happy people, not the other way around. It's a theme in the book. Preserve the asset. The most important asset you have is your health. Your money, your power, your education is not important when you are dead. So why don't you preserve the asset? The most important asset you have is the health. It's a theme that we have in the book. Technology is your friend. Artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence, generative AI, ChatGPT. Don't fight technology, you won't win. Once technology has been discovered, you can't uninvent it. Use it to solve your problems. Use it to improve the quality of your life. You cannot ban technology. Once the genie is out of the bottle, there's nothing you can do about it. One major theme is technology is your friend. That's a theme in the book. Just to dramatize the issue of regional integration, Kagoro. These are not economies, Kagoro. These are Mickey Mouse economies. Zimbabwe, $25 billion, 50 million. Who wants to trade with a country this small? South Africa, again, chicken change, this is small. Botswana, that's not a country, that's a village. Nigeria, nothing. We must talk about SADC. Those are numbers now. COMESA, East African Community, those are economies. China, that's an economy. 1.4 billion Chinese, GDP, $19 trillion, that's an economy. India, 1.41 billion people, GDP, $3.3 trillion, those are economies. The US, 334 million people, GDP, $2.5 trillion. These are the countries or the economies that matter under globalization. Now, Africa, when we work together, what do we get, Brian, when we work together? When we work together as Africa, we're talking about 1.35 billion people, GDP, $2.5 trillion. This is the Africa that should negotiate with China. This one. Can you imagine if I was to walk up and say, here come, I'm the African. I speak on behalf of 1.35 billion people, and I have a GDP of $2.5 billion. The Chinese will listen to me, not out of love, out of economics. I'll extract a better deal for Africa when I'm representing these numbers. Not your Mickey Mouse Zimbabwean economy, not your Mickey Mouse South African economy, not your Mickey Mouse Botswana. So stop it. Don't negotiate with China as Botswana, as Nigeria, as Senegal. Negotiate as Africa. That's what we're talking about, not these little Mickey Mouse economies. Look at that. That's what we call global GDP. Do you see your country there? I don't see Botswana. I don't see Zimbabwe. I don't see South Africa. I see China. I see United States. I see Germany. I see Spain. And right at the corner there, when Africa is together, we are something. But no matter how much you try to look, you can't see Zimbabwe there. So how can a country which is non-existent strike a deal with China? You don't exist and you want to negotiate. This is what we call global GDP, $100 trillion GDP. And so we are dramatizing the importance of working together. Also, we can work in clusters. We're talking about solutions. Can you imagine if Botswana, South Africa, the DRC, Zimbabwe, and Angola were to work together in a diamond cluster? When we do that, we'll dominate the world around diamonds. We'll name the price for diamonds. If South Africa and Zimbabwe were to work together on platinum, we'll control world platinum because we have 90% of world platinum. And then we can do beneficiation. Oil cluster, the cluster strategy for minerals, so we can do beneficiations. Some revelations from the book. Arbitrage. Arbitrage is where you have the official rate and the paro rate. When you have that in a country, you criminalize everyone. For example, let's say the paro rate is 400. The official rate is 20. And you are a pastor, you are a reverend, you are a child of God. If you get $500, how are you going to change your money? You're going to go to the official rate at 20? Mutumwa, is that what you're going to do? No, you're going to go to the barrel. So everybody is now a criminal, including the pastor and the reverend and the bishops. Now the danger with that Kagoro is that if everyone is a criminal, so no one is a criminal. I can go and steal your bicycle because we're all criminals. I can go and steal the gold. We're all criminals. Criminalizing everyone in a society is a terrible thing to do because the proper criminals will say they'll get a pass. We're all criminals. We are all trading on the parallel market, so I can go and steal a car and I'm okay. I can steal the gold of a country. Arbitrage criminalizes everybody in a country. Arbitrage is a major looting tool. That's why they don't change it, because they're making money out of it, these guys, these women in this government in Zimbabwe. Which brings back to the farms. Now, under Gono, I want to dramatize something to you. Under Gono, the gap was so huge. Right now, it's getting there now, currently in Zimbabwe. You could have the official rate at 20 and the paro at 400. If you take $10,000 of your own and go to the paro market and buy bond notes or Zim dollars, and take that money and go to Gono and buy US dollars at 20, and take those US dollars and go back to the paro market and buy bond notes and Zim dollars and go 3 times, Sipo, you can convert 10,000 US dollars into 2 million US dollars. Do you hear me? Zhuwao, 10,000 US dollars can be converted into 2 million US dollars by 3 transactions with no production. That was what was called burning. And so the big ballers in Zimbabwe, who were, of course, having access to Gono, were able to convert 10,000 US dollars into 2 million US dollars with no production. Now, if you create 2 million US dollars, what is the best way of using your money for preserve your money? You buy a farm. You buy a farm. How do you buy a farm? Here's the story from the book. All the important people in Zimbabwe have title deeds. Mnangagwa, Chiwenga, the judges, the generals. If you have a national, you're a small person, you are unimportant, please. You are a small war vet, a small army officer, a small businessman if you're holding on to 99 lists. Anyone important in the country is hold on to title in Zimbabwe. Those Bona farms, 21 of them, Bona has title. How do they get the money to pay for? By converting 10,000 US dollars into 2 million US dollars. So right now, they've not even countered the argument. I've been watching the press in Zimbabwe since we announced this. Quiet. Even George Charamba, quiet. Mangwana, quiet. Munangagwa, quiet. Chiwenga, quiet. Guilty as charged. Now, what is going on? President Mugabe was very clear to me. Mutambara. This land reform program will be challenged by future generations. They'll be sitting in 50 years' time, in 100 years' time, and say, those guys, those women, in the year 2000, parceled the land to themselves. We're not there. Why should we keep this program? I wasn't there in the year 2000. How can they parcel the land to themselves? Let's reverse it. Now, how do you reverse it? How do you protect you from a reversal? You get title. Anyway, read the book and you get an understanding of the importance of title and how title was used. And we can talk about some of these views there. I'm coming to the end, Brian, and I'm dramatizing a few things. When we say documentation, it's not just the written word, it's the pictures, they tell a story. It's the videos, other artifacts. Let us document our stories as Africans through writing, through pictures, through videos, through other artifacts. That's how we can protect our legacies. That's how we can write our history. Okay? This book is 968 pages, 8 sections of pictures. So without pictures, it's 720. The pages with pictures are not numbered. So if you want pages with written stuff, 720. The entire book, 968. Because we want to make sure we document history. And entertain you also. It's a big book, so you want to check out some pictures and entertain yourself in the process. South Africa, with President Zuma there. The Chinese. One thing that we push in the book is, how can we learn from China around leadership? How can we learn from China around technology? How can we learn from China around numbers? And also, how can we force the Chinese to do business on our terms? Beneficiation on the continent with us, not taking raw materials from Africa to, that's a major issue. And we tried to talk to them, but when we left office, the program was changed. Okay? Allow your spouse to have a say. That's Jackie there, having her say. Now, when I was in Harare, Sekai Holland said, I expect Arthur Mutambara, he married his equal. Now, Sekai Holland, Minister Sekai, I want to correct you in public. You are wrong. Jackie is a CEO. She sits on 3 boards. On one of those boards, her colleagues are Dangote and former Prime Minister David Cameron. So I didn't marry my equal. I married my superior. So allow your superior to speak. Allow your superior to be. Whether you're a woman or a man, please respect your spouse. They could actually be your superior. Don't drown them. So that's what we're doing there. And then also building alliances with the Americans, the inclusive government, Mashakada, Chombo, Mangoma, we proved that Team Zimbabwe is possible. We can work together as a team of rivals. It can be done. With the old men there, I explained where we got along. That's Kundai. Those guys are big now. Kundai, I can just stand up. We're going to show pictures of you. These guys are big now. These are old pictures. That's Kundai and Kutsai. So they are there, and our friend there, this is when the constitution was signed. That's them when they're small. Now they're big. Spepa Ngomo, Prime Minister Changirai. Again, we're saying, please, the story is not complete without pictures. The story needs pictures. Mapfumo, Mutukudzi, they're in the book. Ghana, soccer, the World Economic Forum. It's important that we put all these things in writing and document our experiences. General Mujuru, very interesting stories there from the general. I used to sit next to him, at Hero Zeka, and Mugabe would be right there. And the general would say, "Ndinda kakarongera kamfana." Karukutonga ndinda kakarongera. He tells me a story. When they went to Mozambique with Tegere, Samora was not impressed. He didn't want to see Mugabe at all. So General Mjuru was called by Samora. "Who is your leader?" Typical Samora. And Ndakati ndi Robert. Hands ndakafirwa kumeso, spat on by Samora. "Get out!" And given a handkerchief to clean up. "Get out." And then when he left, he talked to the PA to Samora. The PA said, "Look, please, when you go in there, don't talk about Robert Mugabe. Samora is close to Ndabaning Sithole. Don't talk about Mugabe when you go there." Ndakazodzoswa futhi zikazi, "Uya, who's your leader?" Ndikati ndi Ndabaning Sithole. Asipa hondo tichambowesa Mugabe tozodzosa kuna Ndabaning. So it's better. He said that our leader is Ndabaning Sithole, but during the war, we'll put Robert Mugabe. Afterwards, we'll take the power back to Ndabaningi. And Samora said, "Better." And then he says, "Ndakazoroga press conference. Unokaza kanogona kutaura kaka. Kovaka Roas press conference. Samora kovajira, Nyerere kovaka yambuka." That's General, that's his version. I created this man. Anyway, I also was one of the few people who saw his dead body. Ladies and gentlemen, it was skeletons. There was no flesh. It was no normal fire. There was a chemical used. I saw that with Mugabe. Oh, anyway, buy the book. Edgar Tegere, fascinating stories about Edgar and Lacoste. Oh, that one. We supervised him. You need to ask us whether he's a good leader. He was my student. President Mugabe, Morgan Tsvangirai, and myself were running the government. These were our ministers. Kasukuwere was one of them. We used to grade them out of 10. So if you want to know whether Tyson is a good leader, you talk to me. If you want to know whether Mnangagwa knows anything, you talk to me. You see, they came through these hands. And Tyson is here. Tyson is here. He's going to talk for himself. I won't say much about him. But we worked very well together. And Gono, with his burning, we saw him. And this one, okay, we together. Together, Brian, together. The coup was in the making, Brian. We just didn't know it. And, but we could smell the coup. The coup plotters were friendly. But we had, and President Chamisa there, we had a good team in the government, Maduku and all that. Aha, the coup. Now, President Chamisa, Morgan Tsvangirai, and myself attended that coup presidency, SIPO. We sold out SIPO. You were right, we were wrong. We went there. And you can see Chamisa say, "Congratulations." I'm saying, yeah. That was the presidency of the coup. SIPO will explain to you why we were wrong, and we won't say much. But we attended, this is the presidential inauguration of the coup president. Mutumwa, were you there? I think you came. Anyway, we don't run away from what we did. Where we are wrong, we explain. Others will be hiding. No, we don't hide. We show the picture. Okay? And that is the lunch after the inauguration, Oxford and all that. Listen. We need pictures. They speak volumes. That's Kruma, that's Sisidangarembwa. The old man is dead. Again, we go down there to pay our respects. Just a few videos to show you a bit of the element.
The Constitutional Select Committee led the process, holding public hearings and consultations over the making of a new constitution for Zimbabwe. 2 all-stakeholders conferences were held, and the draft was produced amid power struggles among the political players. The intervention of principles to the global political agreement gave way to the referendum.
We don't write a constitution for today. We write a constitution for posterity, for future generations.
As a country, we have invested so much in this process, in both financial and material terms, if indeed in time terms.
We are the ones who agreed that no, we shall not have Kariba. We must now have a people-driven constitution.
This set the stage for approval by the electorate, parliament, and now it has been signed into law.
I think we can all say today is a great day for our country. For the first time in the history of this country, we have a constitution that we've authored on our own without the facilitation of foreigners. This is a dramatic improvement from Lancaster House. I think that is what we should celebrate today, that Zimbabweans have come together. Then a bit of tourism, Mzembi, a bit of tourism there, Sanganai.
Umbo, fellow Zimbabweans and members of the tourism ecosystem, I'm just happy to be here to launch this fair. And I want to start by explaining why I call this an ecosystem. What we want to do in this country is to have an approach that says, let us approach tourism as an ecosystem.
So, Brian, after volume 3, am I retired? Am I done with writing? What do you think? Certainly not. We got 2 more projects. One is in engineering. You've heard me talk about artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence. The Bible is coming on that subject. On design and analysis of that, and it's 1,000 pages. The volumes get bigger. It's an engineering book. The day you stop writing is the day you die, Brian. Keep writing, Brian. And then the last project is this one. The AG Mutambara story from 1640 AD. What I did was to do research 10 generations above my father. And so this will be a story with no ideas, no solutions. I don't seek to save the world. I'm just telling stories. And starting from that generation, just a plain story, no fancy ideas, no motivation to change the world. And these are my ancestors from Mbire, from Gutu, 10 of them, right down to my great-grandfather, Papiro, Mutambara number 1. Then my grandfather, Marije Tumani. Then my father, Philmon. Then yours truly is number 12 in that lineage. And then that's the man, my great-grandfather. Now, Brian, you are having a problem with one wife. This guy had 12. you got to pick up lessons from my great-grandfather. He was taking care of 12 and 43 children. Now, I wish I could reverse history and general. Anyway, so this will be a book about the past. So for the first 4 chapters, I won't be in the book. I'll only start appearing after chapter 5. That's my mother. They get married. All of a sudden, we are stuck in the village. I spent 11 years Mutambara, Chimani, without going Mtari. For 11 years, I went to Mtari 2 times. Do you hear that? Chimani is very close to Mtari. But I only left Mutambara to go to Mutari 2 times in 11 years. I was experiencing hard times. You can see that I'm not very happy there. I'm hungry. They were not feeding me. Anyway, then we get 4 out of 4 PhDs out of that, then 2 out of 4 professors. What happened? That's the story for the future. For now, we stick to volume 3. For now, we stick for solutions on Zimbabwe. Kagoro, we must write. We must document. I thank you so very much for this opportunity.
Jackie, I think anyway. Okay, you heard for yourself this number 12. If Janet and if you are here, please come. So, gentlemen, I'm not going to dilute. I know that Saviour knows that I'm normally a combatant. Today, I'm as soft as wool. What I'm going to do, gentlemen, I'm just going to invite you to do your 3 minutes. And then afterwards, I want you to be quick so that people can have questions for Professor Mutambara and for yourselves as we launch the book. So we're going to go in this order, and I will explain the guys there to my right. And I'm not the one who put them to the right, but I think you can take consolation that you are to the left of the room, gentlemen. Huh? I think that's the... yeah, so let me tell you who we have. Dr. Walter Mzembi, Zimbabwe's former Minister of Foreign Affairs and also former Minister of Tourism. Doc, you will be our first speaker, and you will be followed by my brother Kuseni Dlamini. Kuseni is a Rhodes scholar and is chairman of Johannesburg Stock Exchange listed Massmart Holdings. I know many of you actually do shop there. And is the chairman of Aspen, Pharmacare Holdings, and also a former CEO of Old Mutual South Africa and emerging markets. So Kuseni, you follow my brother Walter. And then, of course, afterwards is Saviour Kasukuwere, who's Zimbabwe's former Minister of Local Government, Rural Development and National Housing. He's also Zimbabwe's former Minister of Youth Development, Indigenisation and Economic Empowerment. And Saviour has just put his hat on the... I've never seen him wearing a hat indoors, but he normally wears a hat like mine. So maybe that's where the hat is. He's put his hat in the ring to challenge... advocate, senior counsel. Omphemetse is a Rhodes scholar, is a senior counsel here in South Africa, is going to follow, and then afterwards, Tambudzai Gonese-Manjonjo, who's a lawyer and the deputy director of the Southern African Litigation Center. And then, of course, we will have Sydney Malunga. Now that we are doing the first, the second, the third, Sydney Malunga, the second, Sami Malunga, sorry, who's a lawyer and director of programs of Open Society Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't wish to come and show my stomach or my ugly face or my beautiful hat, so my request will be very simple. Do your 3 minutes. If you see me now looking at you in a threatening manner, that means that you've gone overboard. Just your 3 minutes. And then as soon as the speaker finishes, let the next speaker come, then I will introduce the last panel. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you, moderator, our dear brother, Brian Kagoro. Let me recognize Madam Jackie Mutambara, and indeed the man who has brought us all together, Deputy Prime Minister Mutambara. Once a Deputy Prime Minister, always a Deputy Prime Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, going through the book, it is clearly not your traditional book, but a series of modules on leadership and governance with thought-provoking themes, the first gift of its kind to our contemporary generation, and a befitting handbook for those aspiring to govern both in the corporate boardroom and in politics, in non-governmental bureaucracies, and in government bureaucracies. You will recall, Deputy Prime Minister, Professor Mutambara and colleagues who were with us in government, that as part of our induction after appointment as ministers, would be handed or taken through a cabinet handbook, which would be some kind of guide into ministerial work after deployment. But these were very shallow installments and quite uninspiring. I challenge Professor Mutambara to lead a volume 4, I think we'll sidestep the one that you were showing us now, to lead a volume 4, which I think should be an extrapolation of your epic work into a cabinet handbook for the future. If you don't mind, we can contribute to this one, or essentially transcribe numerous aspects of the book that I have read. I've almost gone halfway through it into what I'm proposing. This handbook would disruptively focus on how not to govern and the essence of strategic and clean government. I propose this out of all seriousness, recognizing that at the center of non-delivery of public service in our country and perhaps in Africa is a dearth of leadership and the strategic thinking, and the absence of vision itself, worse than impaired vision, and excuse my language, blindness. I say this because the only job in the world where you don't necessarily have to have a qualification or to be qualified in anything is being a minister of government, and by extension, president. You only have to be loyal and perhaps destined. These jobs are square pegs in round holes, hence the non-performance of governments, with the evident failure we all witness today of non-delivery, melting economies, and massive production of poverty. That said, may I applaud Professor Mutambara for doing all of us who worked with him the favor of capturing our legacy of the inclusive government of 2009 to 2013, this period of respite from non-performance of government since 1997, thereabouts, needed this kind of justice from a role player at his level at the time as Deputy Prime Minister. The period, ladies and gentlemen, after witnessing what we are going through today and in the past, was a rare visit to our people at the time of unity of purpose, inclusivity, and an attempt at equal opportunity and national healing. This is the period which characteristically and authentically should have earned the designation of a new dispensation, not the current old wine in old bottles, dubbing itself as such at this time. And because we're in denial of this legacy that has been captured in this book, we lost a very useful zero-based benchmark on clean government, and with it excellence parameters descending into the mediocrity that we all have come to know in the recent times in our governance. So why is this book important? It is important because we nearly got it right during the GNU. We nearly got it right during our global political agreement days as a country. We can't shred that legacy. It's competently captured in this book, so insofar as I've read it, and it is what perhaps President Mugabe should have written and bequeathed to us without suffering the current distortions that we are all experiencing. It is what I think the first 15 PhD holders in our first cabinet should have written, and what our government at exit in 2017 with 23 PhD holders should have captured, and what eminent liberators failed to capture and is only captured on their behalf through obituaries that are read at the Heroes Eka. That's all there is to their credit every time that we assemble there to bid farewell. I owe President Mugabe a book, let me declare today, because he asked me to write one after the coup. It was going to be a transcription of his memos. He wanted me to capture as far back as he could remember after his imposed retirement. So I was, from September 2018, going to be his special assistant. He actually offered me that job. And my job was just going to sit down and record him, download everything in his head for the remainder of his life. And unfortunately, I could not do it because I asked him to write officially to the current government to ask for me to be deployed as special assistant, and within 48 hours, the response came. I was on the run. So it would have been something else, this book. It came too late, hence the importance of Professor Mutambara's book, because it picks some of those conversational series that he had with the men. So it is covering that gap, I think, that we probably missed. So no man, in closing and concluding, let me hasten to say that no man in living history was as rich as King Solomon, recorded in the Bible to have stored wealth equivalent to 2.3 trillion pounds, 2.3 trillion pounds. And with it, several temples, houses made out of the best and most precious stones, the best wood, cedar wood from Lebanon, and so forth. But we have no evidence of that today in our midst, that there was once upon a time a 2.3 trillion British pounds rich man in the name of Solomon. All he left us are two books, Ecclesiastes and Proverbs, as we see them in the Bible, nuggets of ideas, of wisdom and vision. So chapter by chapter, the book we celebrate today, the book we are commemorating today, is an amalgamation of our heritage and contradictions as a people, and a distilled version of the adversity that we have experienced as a nation, an opportunity at futuristic ideas that present themselves as solutions to a myriad of our problems. And this, we are taken through this walkabout that he presented to us today. So I was privileged to be in his team. We did a couple of projects together, and I can speak almost very intimately to the book as if we were co-authoring it together. I'm still reading the book, I'm enjoying it, and I urge you to grab a copy and be part of this journey. Buy the book. I thank you.
It's always very difficult to speak after honorable ministers have spoken, sitting on a row with two of them. It's an honor and a privilege indeed. Arthur, thank you very much for being the visionary that you are. We're here to celebrate you. By the way, one of the roles that Brian didn't mention, which I'm proud of, being here today, is that I'm chairman of the University of Pretoria Council. GIBS is part of the University of Pretoria Council. I'm also chairman of the advisory board of this great business school, which has been rated by the Financial Times as one of the top in the world and the top in Africa. So it's really an honor for me in my capacity and role as part of the ecosystem of the University of Pretoria and GIBS to be here and to see all the people that are here for us, for all of us to celebrate the intellectual prowess of one of our own, who is not just an intellectual, but also an activist, a practitioner, and a revolutionary. And I had the privilege of being at Oxford around the same time as he was, and being a Rhodes Scholar. We used to have great moments when we were debating and discussing the state of the world and the need for all of us to get stuck in to make a difference in terms of being change drivers, not just mourning and whinging about how unfair the world is to Africa. So what Arthur is doing and has done is something that needs to be propagated across the whole of Africa, and I like the Pan-African strand to it, that you emphasize Arthur, but I'll also argue we need to think about the broader diaspora outside of our continent so that we build those connections, establish those enduring connections, we collaborate, we share ideas, and we inspire each other. The African diaspora and us as Africans are very notorious of not being joined up, of being too isolated, working in silos, and not maximizing the leverage that we can get if we cooperate. I think through the intellectual thought and work of Arthur, we should really take a leaf in terms of how do we take it forward in our own individual capacity, and also as a collective, and also in the respective institutions where we are, in terms of just creating the right ecosystem, and also building the right institutional arrangements to be able to really reset the position that Africans occupy in the global scheme of things. Because I'm sure all of you will agree that if any one of us in this room, especially those that are black, landed Heathrow or JFK, we are very likely to be mistaken for a refugee or a person running away from hunger and poverty. But if somebody who looks Singaporean or looks Chinese comes in there, they are likely to be seen as biotech investors coming in to look at generative AI, robotics, driverless cars, EVs, and how did they manage to do that? They changed the paradigm. Singapore was at the same level of development in the 50s as most African countries were. Only thing they did is exactly what Arthur is talking about. Invest in our people, embrace scholarship, embrace intellectualism, be single-minded about pursuing knowledge, even for knowledge's sake, but also deploying knowledge in everything that we do. Make sure that whatever we pursue is evidence-based, is fact-based. People can differ with you on anything else in terms of your opinions, but as we all know, people are entitled to their own opinions, but not everyone is entitled to their own facts. Facts are facts, and I think what we have here is really empirically grounded work that is so inspiring, that is worthy of celebration, worthy of propagation, and worthy of emulation. I've just come back from West Africa. This morning, I was attending the CEO Africa Forum. One of the topics we're talking about is how do we move from 300 to 3,000 in terms of African-owned companies that can generate revenue of $1 billion US dollars and above. Research has been done. In Africa, there are only 345 companies that generate revenue of $1 billion US dollars and above. You go to China, there are over 3,000. You go to the EU, it's 2,875. You go to our peers in LATAM, it's 1,800 and something. But in Africa, it's only 345. The question is why? It's because we are missing, conspicuously so, in the broader economic scheme of things. So as we pursue thought leadership, we also have to pursue economic leadership, technological leadership, and also innovation in all spheres. And we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution, Arthur. In all hitherto existing industrial revolutions, Africans have largely been spectators. How do we make sure that in the fourth industrial revolution, we are not spectators, we are actors. We are on the driving seat. We are innovators. But if we keep sitting and doing nothing and not coming with the right policies, this industrial revolution will just be talk in Africa. Because it's fancy that everybody must say, oh, fourth industrial revolution this, fourth industrial revolution that. But what are we doing to create the right ecosystem for the young generation? It's good to see the young Mutambaras here and see how they've grown as well, comparing to their pictures there. How do we make sure the youth, in fact, next time we have this event, maybe we should make sure we set a target, have 40% youth and 60% adults, because the future is with the young people. Those are the people that are going to take over the legacy and make sure that they reposition and reset our positioning in the global scheme of things, and they also make sure that the brand equity of Africa is improved and enhanced. So it's really great to be here and to see the whole family here. It's really exciting indeed. And to see all of you on behalf of the GIBS and the University of Pretoria, I'm inspired to see the hall full as it is. And let's hope that there is a new volume every year, Arthur, so that this becomes a highlight in the annual calendar. We can all gather here to see each other. Omphemetse and I were joking that if we are not inspired by the third volume, we wonder what will inspire us. But I always come out very inspired here, very energized and very refreshed. And thanks to you, and keep up the great work. You are an icon, you are a revolutionary. You don't just talk the talk, but you also walk the talk. We still expect more in terms of your pioneering and revolutionary leadership and contribution to society, and dare I say the world at large. Many thanks indeed.
Thank you very much, and good evening. Professor Mutambara,
Mutambara, distinguished colleagues here present. Arthur was a man with a plan when he joined cabinet. From the day we were sworn in as ministers, obviously he was our senior, he already had a camera. And I used to wonder, but why is this man moving around with a camera? And I realized later that there's only one guy who's going to monetize this GNU. So Mutambara has made a bit of money out of the GNU. While most of us are struggling to live in exile, Mutambara is making money. But on a serious note, I want to say Professor Mutambara is a visionary. Each time we sat in cabinet, he was very clear on issues that were right at the core of our nation. That GNU government was not an easy process, let alone it was bringing 3 or so political parties together with completely different ideologies. But one guy who was the glue was Professor Mutambara. Why? He put national interest ahead of personal interest. He put national interest ahead of partisan interests. Those of us who were coming from ZANU-PF, those who were coming from the MDCT, we needed only Arthur to then say, but having listened to both sides, in his way, having listened to both sides, from President Mugabe and Morgan Tsvangirai, I, Arthur Kuseni Mutambara, thinks this is the best way for us to move. He would say he took a plunge. He says, I took a plunge in politics. I was in Joburg working. I got a call to serve in politics. And I came, and here am I, Deputy Prime Minister of the Republic of Zimbabwe. And indeed, he was a powerful man. We all had to salute him. He sat and ate with the elders. We had to sit below. But we also enjoyed the support he gave us. I was Minister of Indigenisation, and he captures it in his book very well. Before I talk about that, let me say, with Arthur, you had to be careful. I think from then, you don't want to start a fight with Arthur because he'll capture and deal with you in one of the volumes, whether it's volume 5, whether volume 6. So you have to be very careful. And I'll also be very careful with what I say here. But I am very excited because going through that book, he really captured all the essential details, all the essential things that we did and discussed in our cabinet. But his commitment to the empowerment of Zimbabweans was unrivaled, 100% behind the empowerment of Zimbabweans. He was clear on the land reform. Well, I'll beg to differ a bit, Professor, where you say they all have title deeds. I just lost mine, my farm, they took it. I don't have title. But yes, indeed, there has been quite a bit of exaggerations in terms of what one owns, in terms of the farms. There were some bad decisions made, but overall, I think the idea to empower the people of Zimbabwe in terms of the land question is not debatable. But Professor Mutambara, like I've said, kept the whole team focused on the key issues in our nation. He supported decisions that had to do with education especially. Now they with President Mugabe, they were buddies. When it came to talking about education, they would speak over the heads of some of the colleagues who were not gifted enough to understand the English. So then you would say to yourself, now we have a problem here. The president is now talking to the DPM. Then the lingua changes. It becomes a bit deeper. And the others are now trying to say, but now, why don't you speak in Shona so that at least we all can catch up with what you are saying? But, Professor, your book is important for all of us. You did not leave anybody out. From your interactions with Edgar Tekere, your interactions with Prime Minister Tsvangirai, you captured details about Dlamini Stole. Something that has not been captured, we're actually finding answers to some of the political questions that our country even faces to this day in the book that has been written by Professor Mutambara. But more importantly as well, and which is my last point, is to say his Pan-Africanist views. Professor clearly shows us the way forward, that the struggle ahead for all of us is economic. The history of our country, the liberation, well done. But that is what happened. From today, where do we go as Africans? We have an economy to look after. I want to thank my dear brother as well, who just come, who spoke before me. He says we've got only about $300 billion companies in Africa. And that is a serious issue. Yet we have over 1.4 billion people. America has 334 million people, but they have more billion-dollar companies than us as Africans. Now, Professor will talk about integration. He says, imagine dealing with the PTA, COMESA, 500 million people. Then we're talking business. Those who break around as big business persons, they actually, if you look at their turnovers, they don't even qualify to be called billionaires. So we need to take this fight, the empowerment of our people, the economy, as the key #1 issue. We cannot address poverty in Africa if we don't read that book and understand some of the things that Professor Mutambara puts across for us. Professor, keep going, keep us focused. We need to work especially hard in terms of our economy. Thank you very much.
Good evening. It has been my privilege over the past many years to have known Arthur. We first met at Oxford. He was my senior, and we were both in the sciences, even though I have moved somewhat to the legal profession. And I always remember Arthur when we had our walks or our runs, and he would say, Omphemetse, you know, you can't stay here in Oxford. Let's go back to Africa. You have to do something. You have to be involved. And I must say that true to himself, Arthur has done exactly that. And I think it is rare to come across a person who actually has sense of what they believe is their place in the world. In 2017, I was privileged to be standing here when Arthur launched his first book. And I, again, was equally privileged to make a few remarks. And I said at the time that Arthur is an idea. And I have become more convinced and certain in that assessment of him, that Arthur is an idea, and very much animated by many things, including what has brought us here today, and as he says, the need for documentation. It is an important exercise which, to many professionals who should be able to, we nonetheless do not do that. And documentation, I see that it's about identity. It's about the contestation of the intellectual landscape. Who are we? Why do we hold the views that we do about ourselves? Many of you would have heard recently that Egypt is suing some filmmaker for portraying Cleopatra as a black person. I don't consider that issue to be about color as such. It is about identity. What do we as natives say about who we are? And related to that is what has been said about this stone of houses, and I've come to know that that is what Zimbabwe is. saying that it is impossible for natives to have had a hand in the coming into being of that stone house in Zimbabwe. And the question is, why is that the case? Partly because, or perhaps to a large extent, because the documentation, the contestation of ideas about natives not being capable of having a hand in the construction of that house. So Arthur is that idea that is very urgent in motivating us to document and to be a presence. This is a third volume of a trilogy, but I have a good sense that it is not the end. And Arthur seems to confirm that. He says that he's going to go back to the year 1640. And to the historians, as it happens, I believe that was at the time when Charles I lost his head, and England, for the first time since William the Conqueror, was a republic of sorts. So Arthur, we look forward to what is to come. You remain an inspiration. You remind us of the need for archaeology of memory. You remind us that we should be able to say about are we to be blown hither and thither by and go wherever the four winds get blown, or are we going to be conscious of being present in at a time and place? You have given us a challenge about the need for documentation. That has become urgent, and we are very pleased and are inspired, and we do give an undertaking in this public forum that we will follow your footsteps. Thank you, Arthur.
Good evening. I must start by saying something very controversial. I've just realized that I am part of what we in a civic society call a manel. Meaning that in this whole panel, there are only 3 women. I do not know what that means. However, I will say that reading Professor Mutambara's book, I noticed that he has very great ideas about the importance of women to the economy, to politics, and to the development of the state. I'm hoping that as we proceed in any other gatherings that are going to be, you will also consider the fact that women have such a great contribution to make when it comes to speaking about these issues. But that is not a very big issue. I wanted to start with a very famous statement. If you're a student of history, there was this statement that we used to get as to be examined on, and it was, the Bourbons had learned nothing and forgot nothing. This was an indictment of the Bourbon monarchy in the French Revolution, indicating that the monarchists who had been deposed through a popular revolution and now had an opportunity to rule again and had a chance to do things over, did not learn anything from the mistakes of the past. They were also very reactionary, seeking to return things as they were before, which had also brought them misfortune. As a result of that, they were deposed again, and now we know France as a republic, and it has never been a monarchy again. This statement, which was attributed to one de Talleyrand regarding the Bourbons, is an illustration of what happens when history is not known or used as a lesson that informs the future. The dearth of writing from African authors means that we never get to know the truth and avoid the pitfalls that our forebears fell into. Professor Arthur has written a 600-page book. Well, I think it's more than 600 pages. Yes, he says it's 920. At first glance, so I got a copy of this book. At first glance, I was very much intimidated, particularly in its hardcover form. But after having gone through it, it is surprisingly quite readable and also quite relatable. Why? Because we've lived through these things. We've lived through the things that he documents in this book. He has documented what he has lived through and helps us to get a bird's eye view of some of these experiences, hardships, and lessons that we have to learn about what happened in the GNU. What can we learn and what can we forget? Well, for us that were outside, the GNU period was a period of calm for Zimbabwe, especially coming from the turmoil of the preceding years, economically and politically. But, as Professor Mutambara says in his book, it was only a brief interlude. Why was it so brief? I believe there is a lesson there. And Professor, with clarity, points out, and a great amount of humility, I must say, points out the inherent weaknesses of the arrangement. For example, the lack of a conflict dispute mechanism to deal with the many conflicts that would have come out of what was essentially a forced marriage. Also, some of the other issues were also the failure by the opposition. Well, the funny thing is that they came in and they were supposed to be equal partners, but they remained opposition, and we still continue to think of them as opposition. And perhaps that was also one of the weaknesses there. But there was a failure to push for reforms early on. This is an issue that we are still suffering from, that we still grapple on, despite the fact that we have a constitution, which we still call a new constitution, 7 years later. It has never been fully implemented, but it already has 2 amendments. One of the biggest lessons that we learn, which Professor Mutambara highlights in his book, is that the lure of the illusion of power and access is a big, big, big issue. As we all know, some of the participants of the GNU have been accused of having, been lured and started enjoying the trappings of power and becoming what some of them were criticizing others. For me, the biggest lesson as someone from civic society is the danger of co-option. This is a lesson for us all, not just those in opposition, but particularly for us, speaking truth to power and fighting for accountability. In some conversations I've had with colleagues frustrated, with the sometimes futile exercise of convincing politicians to change, to achieve social justice, to uphold human rights, to ensure economic prosperity. Suggestions have been made that, why don't we join politics ourselves? Why don't we try and change things from within? And indeed, some of us in civic society have been co-opted into government. The examples, there are very recent examples in the region. The implications of co-option, in my view, looking at what has happened elsewhere, when you are now part of government, and I think, Professor Mutambara, you felt this, you can no longer speak. You can no longer speak truth to power because you are power. You can no longer distance yourself from what government does. You will now have collective responsibility. And you get caught up also in the glitz and the glamour. And I think the biggest issue for me is that you have now left, you know, the important job of speaking truth to power. And the unfortunate thing as well is that the people that usually get co-opted into government are the most powerful in terms of speaking. And therefore, you no longer have those people. They are now part of government. So, having said this, I do not mean to be negative, because co-option is an option. Is it the best thing? I don't know. The lessons of the GNU, as highlighted in your book, Professor, show us that without a clear plan, discipline, and vigilance, we run the risk of either being completely useless and used as figureheads to show the cooperation between government and civic society. That is when we decide to be co-opted. Or we also run the risk of becoming the monsters we seek to change. Like I said, I make no recommendation, only to urge extreme caution. I will also say that you have provided solutions in your book, and I think those of us that are considering getting co-opted, I use that word not as a swear word, but those of us that are intending to fight from within, perhaps I can rephrase it that way, must read Professor's book, because for me, I haven't actually read the whole of it. That was the one part that really caught me. For me, it's important to look at lessons learned from the issues that are highlighted, and also solutions that are provided. I want to say, Professor, that I am very much amazed at this effort. I'm a student of history. I ended up being a lawyer, but history was my best subject at school. But the one thing that always used to trouble me was that the texts that are used are very remote. They are not written by our people. So we get a view that has been written by outsiders. It is a good thing when the insiders themselves write. Yes, of course, it's your view, and therefore it has your own bias to it. But it is important that we get to know what your bias is and we are able to analyze. I would say congratulations on the book, and please buy the book. Thank you.
I am most grateful, Jackie, to Rumbi for telling us that Arthur was co-opted. They would have forced you and I to say that. And Rumbi, oh, sorry, Tambudzai, I don't know even why I was calling you Rumbi. It's because I wanted to just keep certain running themes going. Tatenda is here. Tatenda, we're going to have Sipo, and then Tatenda Mazarura-Mhike. And I'd already introduced you, Tatenda. But Sipo, please come through. For the rest of the panel, I'll be standing here as a policeman.
Why did you get up just before I came? You see, out of respect for Sis Jackie and Mkoma Arthur, I will keep our problems off for today.
Thank you so much. I'm very privileged to be here and to speak. I want to say something that many people don't know. I bought 20 copies of Arthur's first book. Was it the first or the second? I bought 20 copies of it. Can you please tell people that I bought 20 copies? I'm actually hoping I'll get this one free because I think I've certainly earned it. I'm so proud of my brother Arthur. To not just write one book on your life, but to write 3. I mean, your life has to be really colorful. It has to have so much in it, but you also have to have the ability to remember and recall, right? Many of us can't even write a chapter on our lives. We get stuck on just trying to document what our lives mean or what we've gone through. I'll focus on the things that speak to me the most in the book. Arthur's book is about values. And I care so much for values more than anything else. And Arthur's book is about leadership. The failure of it, the absence of it, the need for it, the importance of leadership in transforming not just our countries, our economies, our societies. His own failures. As a leader, part of a leadership cohort, that meant, well, that was in probably the wrong place at the right time or the right place at the wrong time. It encapsulates something that my brother Kuseni talked about, which I think Chinua Achebe talked about. There's nothing wrong with our continent. It's got beautiful rivers, hills, mountains, trees, beautiful fauna, flora. Our problem is leadership. That's at the heart of our continent. And it's not just leadership, because you can have leadership in any way. The leadership has to be transformative. It has to be based on values. For goodness sake, anybody can lead. Mugabe led us for 37 years. It appeared as if he had values, but many of us say this many times. Mugabe didn't go bad in 2000 when Morgan Tsvangirai came. Man was always bad. I'm sorry, Patrick. Man was always bad. He killed 20,000 of my people in Matabele in the 1980s, for goodness sake. I shudder when people say, oh, he was a liberation hero. And then what happened? He was like that. Lack the values, lack the empathy. It's not political, but it's important. A leader must care for his people. If you do not care for your people, you are not going to do anything right by them, because you see the position of leading as serving your own interests. So I like the value basis of your book, my brother. It starts with the liberation struggle, a just struggle, a necessary struggle. I hear in Zimbabwe when things are so bad, people say, no, Smith was better. For goodness sake, how could Smith have been better? Ian Smith was racist. Not only was he racist, he was a butcher. He tortured our people, he killed them. He excluded them from everything. He reserved the best jobs, the best houses, the best everything for a small minority, 3% of our population. Yes, he built roads, but there were bad roads that were going to the townships. Just like Soweto didn't have power now. We say, okay, South Africa now no longer has, you put black people in charge and suddenly, but you forget that South African economy was for white people, I'm sorry to say. Let's not have amnesia, right? Let's not have amnesia about it. So I like the fact that you start your book with the liberation struggle, Arthur. We didn't just find ourselves there. We cannot have, a struggle must always have memory. We cannot forget that we ended up here because we were trying to right historical wrongs. Anti-imperialism as a value, very important, my brother, because it makes the book speak not just to Zimbabweans, but to everybody. Because imperialism is not dead. We forget, colonialism is not dead, it's not finished. It has transformed itself. It has taken different forms. We are now colonized differently via Oxford. Rhodes is alive. I'm sorry, Omphemetse. I'm sorry, Kuseni, but Brian talked about this in Rwanda last week. They take our best brains and they take them to Oxford and they brainwash them, then they bring them back, and then they write 3 books. And we read them. And we celebrate. Equality as a value. The desire to make sure that everybody has a fair share, a fair chance. A fair chance of everything and anything. And I guess this is informed by your own upbringing, Arthur. I can imagine how hard it would have been to go to Mutambara twice in 11 years. So near and yet so far. But the opportunity that everybody must have, and that's the function of leadership, creating opportunities for everybody. It doesn't just happen, I'm sorry to say, whether you're running an organization, a company, or a country. The ability of your people, the lowest person, the most junior, the cleaner, to be able to speak in that organization depends on the values you instill in that organization. If you see everybody, everybody sees themselves. That's very important. Whether you're running a country, if you're only going to see the Zulus or Karangas, as we hear now is happening, everybody else feels like, okay, I don't belong. I don't belong to this country. I'm nobody here. Those are very important issues. Justice. I rant a lot and I rave. I think I tweet so many times. The only competitor on tweeting is Brian. A sense of justice, a critical value for any leader, to make sure that if anybody has been unjustly treated, that injustice is corrected. It may not matter. It may not matter whether you are the one, whether you instigated the injustice as a leader, but it is your responsibility to create the conditions to right a wrong that has happened under your watch, or even under somebody else's watch that you've taken over. That's why new leaders come in, they inherit organizations, and then they realize, hey, wait, why is it that women are paid less than men? I need to fix this. Why is it that, the drivers have a different deal in this organization than others? A sense of justice is critical for any leader. And I like that these themes run through in your book. People-centeredness, I don't even want to repeat that because I've already said it. Pan-Africanism, meritocracy, fairness, and equity. You remind us, Arthur, that a leader without values is nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that's how we find ourselves where we are in many of our countries. We sit here in South Africa and some of us worry. Kuseni, we worry. We are terrified of 2024. But we are more terrified that in 20 years, 25, 30 years, the dream, the post-apartheid dream still remains elusive. And that the excuses keep piling up. And that the scapegoating is endless. And meanwhile, we are hurtling towards another catastrophe and possibly a political deadlock and gridlock, which will not only hobble this country, but hobble the entire region. Imagine in South Africa, which has failed at the local district level to manage coalitions. Imagine a coalition at the national level. Maybe they'll have a GNU and maybe Arthur can come and help you. Thank you so much, my brother. Thank you, Sis Jackie. And thank you.
You now know why I stood up when you was coming, right? As I said, Tatenda Mazarura-Mhike is the Regional Information and Advocacy Officer at Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition.
Thank you, Mr. Kagoro, one of the pioneers at Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition. Good evening, everyone. Professor Mutambara, Dr. Mutambara, and all protocol observed. What an honor and a privilege it is for me to be among such a distinguished panel. I'm probably intellectually not fit to tie the shoelaces of the giants of our time, but here we are. Thank you, Komasipo, for the vote of confidence, and thank you, Professor, for allowing me to be here. As a young intellectual and as one who went to university, I'm impressed by what was achieved by the student leaders of your time, Professor. The space you managed to fashion out, to express yourselves, to influence events in the nation, influence expression, demonstrations, labor movement, the synergies that were created amongst the social movements, and the energetic and intellectual clarity that led to the articulation of the Zimbabwean problem until it became acceptable that ZANU-PF, far from being the solution to Zimbabwe's problem, had become a problem in itself, both in the manner in which it was practicing its rules and the flagrant looting committee nature of its leaders, sheer incompetence of its deployed cadres, dishonesty, chicanery, and all the other big words that I will leave the professor and the other intellectuals in the room to expound. I'm also very impressed by the clear articulation that the solution would be a peaceful process and that it would be done through electoral means, thereby trying to create a disconnect from using violence as a method of change. And that electoral processes and electoral democracy would be what is required to be able to go forward, lest we recreate the very same institutions and processes that we're fighting. I'm also impressed by the cast of characters who respect the professor, whom the professor has worked with, and the ability to make the intellectualism relevant, not only in the theoretical realm, but also in the practical sense. Real politics, social movements, and even young intellectuals like myself can find something to cling on. I have known you, Professor, as a myth, as a legend, as an energy whose writings can and will inspire the younger generation. Lastly, I'm impressed by how you constantly and consistently make reference to the need for us to embrace technology as a people, not only in Zimbabwe, but in Africa. On that note, I would like to make you understand, though, that the younger generation is very visual. I would therefore like to implore you to give broadcasting rights to an international broadcaster and reputable as well, so that they can also focus on producing a documentary or a movie which you can take pieces of and put on TikTok, WhatsApp, Facebook, and other social media platforms, so that we can also include the young generation and the world at large to be able to interact with your words. Exactly a week ago, I was in Zimbabwe to bury one of my best friends, a 32-year-old young woman who was very passionate about democratization and development of Zimbabwe and Africa. But her life, just like of many other young people, was cut short because of a health system that cannot offer the most basic health care to its own citizens. Because we are stuck with a bunch of very old leaders who have absolutely no ideas and solutions to the problems bedeviling our nation. And that needs to change in our lifetime. Thank you very much.
Tatenda, you were in the right direction until you started creating problems for Dr. Jackie and I. You now want Mtambara superstar. It's already a problem now. Without we already have a it's already unmanageable with 5 books. Now with a movie, this might be a problem. Our next speaker, 3 speakers will be Dr. Janet Mnakamwe. Janet is a visiting senior lecturer and chairperson of the Africa Diaspora Workers Network. She will be followed by my Mzukuru, Patrick Zhuwao, who is Zimbabwe's former Minister of Youth Development, Indigenisation and Economic Empowerment, Zimbabwe's former Minister of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare. So Patrick had 2 Sekurus that sat on 2 extreme sides of politics. His one Sekuru was Robert, and his other Sekuru is here, Tamuka. So I want to see where he sits now. Patrick will be followed by Dr. Anthony Kaziboni, who's the head of research of IFK at the University of Johannesburg. So Anthony works with Professor Mutambara. And then they will be followed by Mutumwa Mawere. Mutumwa Mawere is many things. He's chairman at the 1873 FM, an entrepreneur, a business, it's 1873 FM, right? Entrepreneur, business leader. Mutumwa is many things. I just was reminded that I think these young people need to sit with first your family and me, because Tatenda said he's a myth, a legend, and an energy. We need to disabuse them of. Okay. So, Janet.
I'll start speaking whilst I'm walking because I need enough time.
Only 3 minutes.
Hey, I remember Tambudzai made some remarks that were a few of us. So please allow us time. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I think I'm going to also start on a controversial note, but let me not start now. First of all, I know everyone will start by acknowledging Prof. Mutambara. But I will not begin with him. I'll actually begin with our Makoti, Jacqueline, Dr. Jacqueline. Thank you very much. For this book to be there, obviously it's because of the social reproductive labor that she has been providing. While my brother is still, but I know they co-authored. It's co-authoring, right? Yes, it's part of taking back, like what you're saying. Yes, thank you very much, Prof. Good evening, everyone, and all protocols observed. I'm glad that at least Prof had the audacity to say, please come and join us tomorrow. Because if I were gonna come and join without having been invited, those who know me know what was gonna happen in the room. Thank you very much, at least for trying to balance, even though, yeah. This also points to the fundamental question. Unfortunately, I haven't had the privilege to read the book because actually I was away, and but I really captured a lot of key takeaways, fundamental points that Prof raised as always. Just to say, for me, the point of departure of the book, the fact that it's critical, it's constructive criticism and at the same time offering solution makes good sense, right? Because as Africans, we are always there to criticize, but solution dalalo. The unfortunate thing that now we have the big minds, as our chair actually has just alluded to. They have been actually imported the ideas that Prof had. He couldn't express them, of course, in a place where there is closing democratic space. You know, in fact, there wasn't that time, that space to actually exercise his intellectual agents in a way. And what happens? He goes, he actually acquires skills, but he has the audacity to actually come back to us and socialize that knowledge in ways that Africans can understand. Imagine reading Piaget today and reading Prof. Mutambara, whom you can identify with. You know, as an educator, I understand you always have to attach a face to the person. The first person, I don't know, Black African, to be actually associated with the robotics, the ITC, before even we all had to wake up, obviously, is my brother here. I'm adding on to the Nyembes, to the heads, but I will take them off at some point. So we start off there. Quickly, like I said, this is quite intensive, comprehensive, to really have only 2 hours, Prof. I wish we could have some more seminars. Perhaps we could invite you to some of our seminars, because really the issue of technology is becoming an issue in the education sector. And it's up to us to embrace. Apparently, on my long flight coming from somewhere, I had the privilege to come across some article that was actually talking about how to make your enemy your friend. And who is the enemy right now? It's obviously technology. If you talk to Africans about technology, not Africans only, everywhere, people be like, oh, no, no, no. Obviously, the first thing we think about jobs. So in this particular book, as far as I see it, it's actually translating what we see as the negativity into, you know, something that is positive. So I think it's very important that we begin to acknowledge that technology is here with us and here to stay. Apparently yesterday I received another invitation for a workshop on how to do the online assessments and effective online assessments. Even if I'm going to try to run away from it, it means I'm going to isolate myself from the broader community, because there's no way we are going to run away from it, but it's already here. And what do we have to do? Embrace your enemy, translate them into your friend, much as Prof translated the Mugabeism into trying to put sense into him. We all know how much it has been said about infiltration and whatever. So when I was sitting there and trying and reading, I was like, oh, that was a good type of infiltration. Of course, for the ordinary eye that could see him interacting would quickly label, he's a sellout. But he knew what he was doing. Otherwise, today, we couldn't have this voluminous Bible in front of us if he hadn't done it. Oral history, you have to hear it from the primary producers themselves. Then finally, I don't want the chair to, okay. So finally, but not least, this book launch, Prof, is so timely, much especially after the Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition requested me to actually contribute an article, Tatenda, about 2 weeks back on the AFTA and Pan-Africanism. It's like everything that I could see here, it's so prophetic in a way. But what is fundamental for me is how, as Africans, like my brother Sipo actually pointed out, we have actually this selective amnesia And at the same time here, I'm referring to Pan-Africanism. We actually living in a world in which we have nostalgia of colonialism in a way. Why? Somebody asked me only today, what's your take on the BRICS? I don't want to get into a political conversation, but for me, given all the figures and the good analog that Prof shared, in which he's telling us, you look here, the playing field is not level, right? You are still at the lowest echelon within the global economy. And somebody comes in and says, you are my friend. So are we gonna see another new form of colonialism, neo-colonialism, in a very constructive manner? We know what happened at Marange. I'm also privileged to come from Mutambara in the district of Chimanimani, all over there. Every time I hear of any discoveries of minerals, in fact, I should say Zimbabweans, when they hear of discovery of minerals, not only Zimbabwe, we participate in the alternative mining in Daba. Any community here in Africa, anxiety kicks in. Why? Because we know that those resources will never benefit the ordinary citizen. So the issue of governance, how are we gonna be able, how will we realize the time that we have to have a clear transformative agenda for Africa? Pan-Africanism, can we embrace each other as Africans? A very good example that Prof actually, which I need to cite, the issue of clustering in terms of the transitional minerals that have just been found. Now I'm talking about the work. 2 minutes, 2 minutes. So the question, okay, I want to leave you a question.
I'll give you an opportunity during Q&A.
Okay. So,
because the dignitary, don't forget the dignitary.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but thank you very much. I don't mean to, but I felt like we shouldn't run away from this issue of minerals, the political economy of mining here in our own continent, because that's where the integration should begin. Why should we rush to go to external partners? You know, why can't we actually come together and unite as SADC and have the free visas, free movement of people? Thank you so much. I'll continue. Thank you.
You see, I think it comes with the hair, because she had hair. Now I'm worried because another one is coming. Patrick.
Thank you very much, Sekuru, and I will take advantage of your being Sekuru and ask you to translate maybe a couple of phrases that I want to start off with. Pamsoroi mambo Mtambara, Pamsoroi my Mtambara.
Okay. Your big head, Mtambara. Your big head. Is that Pamsoroi? Yeah. Actually, in our language, it means it's an address, Your Excellency, the Chief Mtambara, and the real Chief Mtambara.
Thank you. You know, my Sekuru has instructed me to be controversial because I do have the hair. Different to my Mzukuru there who doesn't have any. And I'll start off by saying I struggle with this notion of this statement that those with power have no ideas and that those with ideas have no power. This man was the Deputy Prime Minister of Zimbabwe. Are you telling me that when he became Deputy Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, he stopped having ideas? So I struggle with such notions. And I also struggle with the notion that the problem is leadership. Because we are all leaders. However, we're here to talk about a book, and we're here to talk about why we should write. Prof said, Zhuwao, where is your book? Writing is a very, very frightening exercise. Because when you write, you will touch some people in their studios. And I'm sure people that have been here might have seen a few interactions. So it becomes very difficult for you to actually write some of the things that you go through, especially within the political space. Because some of them can be quite taxing, especially when you talk about people. And given that context, what I want to say, Kwamuri Mambo Mtambara, and yes, definitely you are Deputy Prime Minister, yes, you're Professor, but for me, the most important recognition that I think I would like to recognize with is with you as Mambo. I would like to start off by saying thank you very much for being brave enough to write. You were brave enough to write about some of the things that some of us would contest. And I struggled, you know, as I saw my name on the list of people, say, okay, there is this issue that I really don't agree with that is written about. And I then resolved that, no, I am not going to contest, especially the issue of title deeds and how ministers got title deeds. Because I don't want to discourage you or discourage anybody else from writing. Because it is important that people engage with your ideas in an uncontaminated space. And once people have engaged with your ideas, then maybe some of us can then talk about our own perspective around issues of title deeds, around issues of leadership. So we must give you the space for you to be able to articulate yourself, and on the top of which, obviously, we must also give you the space for you to push your hustle. You know, you're the one, as Tyson said, you're one of the few that managed to monetize the GNU. And I think one of the key aspects that you talk to is the relationship that you had with Robert Mugabe. He's a very good friend of mine. We've been political friends and personal friends for over 20 years. But he's a bit naughty, Tyson. So at some point during cabinet, Nelson Chamisa wrote a note to Tyson. And that's the last thing that you do, because this guy is a consummate politician. And in that note, Nelson was talking about how much he admired Robert Mugabe. And I want to talk about maybe an aspect of Robert Mugabe, of how he managed to relate with you. It wasn't because he's so much an Anglophile and you went to Oxford. No, it was beyond that. It was basically two things. Firstly, that you are young. And then secondly, that you're educated. And I need to be explained to you why those two things mattered to Robert Mugabe and why they matter within the context of the book. The level of education that you have and the level of education that one gets allows one to then think through ideas. And it is that ideation that then gives birth and gives the foundation of values and ideology. And it is those values and ideology that then should be able to propel people through. Now, President Mugabe had no problems with you having different values to him, but he just wanted you to be able to explain them. And then the second thing about why he engaged with you, and also why he engaged with Walter Mzembi, with Saviour Kasukuwere, with Nelson Chamisa, is Robert Mugabe was very, very aware that he was getting old. And he was touched, he felt he had a specific responsibility around generational renewal. So this is why he engaged with you. And as he engaged with you, one of the things that you guys did, the three of you as principals, in which you unfortunately don't put enough emphasis on, is the creation of the 2013 Constitution. Yes, granted it has not been implemented. Yes, granted it was torn apart during the coup. But that process, not only in terms of product, but in terms of process, was one of the biggest things that happened within the Zimbabwe body politic. Because you got all Zimbabweans to be talking, even though Zimbabweans argued about specific clauses, but you got all Zimbabweans to be talking. You got all Zimbabweans to then move away from the toxicity that was there and the toxicity that currently exists. So you don't do yourself justice in terms of what you actually managed to achieve with the constitution. But then the point has been made, yes, there's been a constitution. The point has been made that you make, that you're talking about thought leadership. But we need to go beyond just ideas and thoughts. We need to basically go into action. And you are very well situated, Mambo Mutambara, as both an academic and a thought leader, to actually push forward this whole aspect of engaged scholarship. And I think it's important that those ideas can then be fueled into action. And once those ideas are fueled into action, then we can then change that narrative about saying that those with ideas don't have power. Because once you are able to act, once you have agency, then you have power. So that then gives us that ability to then move forward. My Sekuru is looking at me. And when we then act, what is it that we're acting upon? And we're talking about the Zimbabwean environment. Zimbabwe basically has got two socioeconomic identities. You've got small-scale traders. That's the reality. And you've got farmers. And it is those small-scale traders that we must go beyond talking ideas, that we must be able to fulfill our actions. And then I want to finalize, yes, I want to summarize by saying that we can't run away from technology. You are the robotics professor, but as a robotics professor, I think what you need to help us with in your next book is how to contextualize that technology. Contextualize that technology within the context of the two socioeconomic identities that Zimbabweans have. But thank you very much, Prof.
I was getting worried. As you are coming, my brother, there's a book for those of you who are not old. Many of you have read Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. But there are two books. This Walter Rodney, Groundings with My Brothers. And just give me 1 minute. I want to read something. Black Studies, Africana Studies, was created in the same time frame as the various decolonization political movements, both in and outside of the academy, to correct erasures of African presences and ongoing distortions, but thereby arose the issues of incorporation and the paradox of current location. New questions need to emerge then that can be brought forward for subsequent deliberation. How to ensure that all students are exposed to a range of knowledges as they make their way through the institution. How to restructure and move out of that order of knowledge in which a series of other human beings and the work they have produced, their epistemologies and ontological systems remain outside of the frames of importance in the larger institutional questions. And then the last bit on the rural economy. I have to read this one for Arthur. He says, the stagnation in the rural areas has reached a stage of crisis. Marginal sugar estates continue to go out of production, leaving hundreds of workers jobless. And the prospects for the banana industry are just as bleak. Apart from their inability to raise the living standards of the black masses, they have failed to make provision for increased water consumption and for drought. They have failed to modernize telephone communications, and they have failed to make allowance for the increased need for electrical power. Consequently, in recent months, the ramshackle nature of the neocolonial structure has been cruelly exposed, and it was the very middle class who have benefited from 1938 who recently complained most bitterly when they suffered simultaneously from water rationing, extensive electricity power cuts, limping telephone service, and no police protection for their property. Sounds like Trevor is writing about South Africa. It's Walter, he died a long time ago. He was writing about Jamaica.
Good evening, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Program Director, and Professor Mutambara, congratulations and well done. A lot of people who've spoken here have largely worked with Professor Mutambara before. I work with him now. And in the trilogy, what you seem to get is a sense of the kind of person Professor Mutambara is. As you read the books, you will get to understand ideas around thought leadership and how, as an agent, he actively engages with power and tries to ensure that there are meaningful discussions around how we can make Zimbabwe, and not only it as a country, but Africa a better place for everyone. In this trilogy, it's a profound exploration tracing his leadership thoughts and philosophical dispositions. Within the context of thought leadership, it becomes extremely important for leaders to express their thoughts, critically analyze them, and also engage with people in power. I will not talk about the last book, but I'll talk about all three books briefly. In the first volume, it emphasizes the importance of igniting citizen activism and creating a society that embraces democratic values, social justice, and shared economic prosperity. And the second one, he showcases the essence of thought leadership in its exploration of transformative ideas, philosophical reflections, and the quest for meaningful change. In this one, by the book, he fearlessly addresses crucial matters around Zimbabwe and the current problems that are there based on his experiences in government. So, the trilogy showcases a valuable perspective on the recent implemented patriotic bill and how it will influence the elections. If you come out and say things are difficult, uchasungu. If you come out and say, I can't find work, uchasungu. If you come out and say there is no water, uchasungwa. Uchasungwa means you'll get arrested because you're not exhibiting patriotism. This bill raises questions about guaranteed freedoms which will be upheld in Zimbabwe. Will they? Such restrictions undermine the foundations of democratic society and impede progress towards achieving what Professor earlier indicated as shared national vision, the Zimbabwean dream. What about opposition? The trilogy continues to illuminate the path toward a future that embodies the ideals of thought leadership and inspires meaningful change for Zimbabwe and the African continent. It raises profound fundamental questions around citizenship. Who is a citizen? Around nationality. What does it mean to be a national? Around patriotism as a concept. So it raises critical issues about the unity of Africans and a strong sense of Pan-Africanism. By engaging these questions and ideas in the book, thought leaders can further enrich the discourse on these topics and guide citizens navigating the complex political landscape in Zimbabwe and the broader African continent. To Professor, again, well done, congratulations. We at the IFK are looking forward to the next edition in which you unpack the 4IR and how we can leverage it in the Global South, and as indicated, how both economies can survive. Thank you.
Mutumwa, I need you to exhibit this level of discipline.
with Brian, we started long back when he was with the NCA. And then I then spearheaded NDA, which is National Development Assembly, in the simple belief that to grow countries, you need individuals. And when did I know Professor? That was because of Mugabe. He may not know. President Mugabe and Mandela were here. We had a dinner in 4 ways. So when I went to India, after we'd gone to America with Mnangagwa, I said, now come, see what the rule of law is. See how people left Zimbabwe with nothing. But today they are multi-millionaires. So I hosted a dinner in Washington, D.C. After hosting, Tyson was at ESCON. I think that was your first time to come to Sandton. No, I think that's let's tell the story. That's what Professor is saying. There are people who are afraid to say they know Jesus because they are too smart. When they tell the story, like Professor is telling the story, why did Mugabe like him? He is not telling, because of me. He told you in front of me. You remember when we go to Siangopa Stadium. During the break, I was with him and Jackie, Grace, and Mugabe. He says, I don't know you without Mawere. And he repeated it to you directly to say, Mawere is the one, Miami. Because Mugabe, for some reason, he doesn't forget. So even when he was with the President Baker at Zuma's inauguration, I come there, we hijacked ourselves with Makamba, wearing nice suits, and then everyone thought we were invited. So we ended up in the I don't know whether you know the story. Yeah. Then we get in there. So Mbeki sees me, says, Mawere, you're here. So he holds my hand. He says, so Mugabe says, Mawere, why have you turned your back on us? So he held my hand. He says, what happened? He didn't know. Genuinely, he didn't know. He says, Mawere, come to my hotel, 10 o'clock. There were only 4 people in that room. That was Grace, the wife, S.K. Moyo, myself, and him. It's not in the book. Because Professor is thinking about thought leadership. Yet when I invited him to Miami, I was not a thinker. I said, the president has asked me to raise money for his wife's charity. And I accepted. And that's why she was thanking me. When I went to Harare, she heard I was in Harare, she called, she says, come to Mazowe. You know who was next to me? It was Wicknell, Chivayo. And we introduced Wicknell, it was Vice President Gomo. She said, Mawere, I'm assigning this guy to you. Because when he comes to South Africa, he buys suits. So that's what we did. So Mutambara does not tell you the real story. When my son was 8, he calls me. And they said, let's catch up. We went to catch up in Sandton. I think there were 3 of us with my son. He tells me about these big issues. And then I said, okay, how do I help? So I thought of an idea called Africa Heritage Society. He was one of the founding members. But after that, he got his own technology, like it's a calling. And then he ran away. Then Scala, Gibson Sibanda, is it Gibson Sibanda, Chimbanikire, Scala is the one who made him a leader of the party. He may not know. He called, Scala came to my office. Then Mutambara made a presentation at my office. Then they called me, he says, Mawere, do you want to be president? Come here. He wanted to see you, the guy with the tie. So he wanted to be president. So Scala is the one who made him a president, not anyone else. So he came to make a presentation. When he made the presentation, you know what happened? Professor did his usual, excellent presentation. Then they called me about, we were in America. They said, Mawere, we're looking for a president. We don't have a president. We have left Changirai. But now we don't, among us, we can't trust anyone. They were staying in Rosebank. So I go and see them. I said, I'm not available. I'm a South African citizen, guys. So I called the professor to say, would you be interested? I think it was on Detroit or something, visiting America. So Scala is the one who stood up and says, present at Africa Heritage Society is something that we must listen to. That's what happened. There's no thought leadership there. Scala had come for something else. But we ended up with his name. I said, why don't you take him? He's a prisoner. He is talking big things. I talk small things. But he was talking about the thought leadership. I said, whenever there's a leadership of thought, I get scared. So that was the problem. I said, I move slowly. Tyson knows that he got a loan of 15 million. For a business that he didn't apply for. Because Chiangwa... No, that's true. Yeah. He had a vice president of Chiangwa. Chiangwa borrows money from First Bank. Because Mawere is my friend. He doesn't pay. You understand? 2 million becomes 6. Then Chiangwa out notice Mawere, I don't know you. Then the money we gave to Tyson, 15, we deducted 6. Is that correct? And then Chiangwa comes to me, how come you didn't give me 15? I said, your behavior.
Brian, time, please, yeah. Time. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Professor, this is the young man. Remember when we spoke on Saturday? He said, I'm so concerned that Professor sold 200 books in Harare, is it? I'm going to take it upon myself to sell more books. He says, Mr. Mawere, you got 30,000 people who are networked to you. Most of these people are looking for loans. But because Tyson does not tell the truth, he wants to be president of the same people who are poor. So I said, no, young man, come and see the professor. You know why I brought him here? What you wrote yesterday in the morning. You mentioned the Kuseni Dlamini. So that's all he is here for. He is not here for me, for you. He wants to go to Massmart. He says, this chairman, I don't know him. I didn't know he was black. I said, no, they were Rhodes scholars. Unlike Rhodes, they're selfish. So when you look at this book, you see pictures here of Professor. You know, I said to Mugabe, we have African Americans in Miami. But I didn't tell him. So I then concocted a plan, that Mandela plan. Okay, I'll just say. No, I have to. Yeah. Okay, no. You are not the VIP. Okay, no, that's fine. Next time when we do something, but let's be honest with our stories. Not bullshit, talk about the future when the past is painful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tyson, you owe me mombe. Colleagues, let's, I'm certain Arthur Mutambara arose as a left-wing firebrand. I think his Oxford colleagues may know this. Today he was talking about how to have more $1 billion companies. and economies. Arthur Mutambara was very critical of Robert. Today he was describing that he and Robert are Anglophiles. I was just whispering to Jackie that I suspect the reason why Robert liked Arthur is because they were both rural boys faking to be urban. they married well. Jackie, you know I've been eternally grateful to you, my sister, for showing my brother lights after the Oxford lights. Yeah. But what we're going to do now is just a quick Q&A. A quick Q&A. We don't have a lot of time. We respect the fact that you came. Just a quick Q&A, and please don't make a speech. My request is just take a minute, ask your question. Mostly questions are targeted for the professor. If you want to ask some of our panel members questions, please do it during the break after the meeting. We will facilitate your ability to interact with them after the meeting. I know there are many questions for the presidential candidate. There are many questions for Mutumwa, since it's clear he gives $15 million loans, right? There's questions for Atete, Janet, because of what she said. So just quick, very brief questions. Please, no thesis for Arthur concerning the book, but you may not have read the book, concerning the GNU and the sense of solutions. So I'm going to start at the right. Can I see in this section if there are people with questions? Okay, we have 3. 1, 2, 3. Please, 1 minute each. Prof, do you have somewhere to write? Yeah. Please introduce yourself and then ask the question.
Evening, my name is Gandhi Bai. I haven't read the book, but I'm excited to read the book that is positioned as a book of solutions. I just wrote my thoughts briefly. So your opening presentation, you opened your presentation with why can't we use ideas to change our conditions? I'm not sure if the ideas I'd like to put forward have been interrogated in the book, but it's important to critically examine and discuss the role of imperialism, the impact of external forces, and suitability of political systems in addressing the African challenges. Does the book recognize the complexities of Africa's challenges and foster critical discussions on the role of imperialism, the suitability of political systems, and learning from diverse global experiences? By doing so, African nations can work towards formulating political systems that are better aligned with their specific context and aspirations. I haven't finished.
No, I gave you only a minute, guys.
And just quickly, let me finish. Yeah. And the question is, why are we so obsessed with this system called democracy, or as Fela calls it, democracy? Yeah, thank you.
All right, the next one. I will ask, let's be brief, we're many. The next one. Yes, sir.
My name is Penuel Nkosi. I want to make a quick remark.
Sir, don't use your romantic voice, okay. Just raise your voice. You look young. Yeah.
Okay, so... Okay, so K53 is a compulsory reading for prospective drivers in the country. This trilogy should be a compulsory reading for current and prospective leaders in politics, economics, governance, and business. So it is undisputable that integration of individual economies is key in addressing Africa's socio-economic issues. My question, Professor, is how does one possibly integrate dysfunctional system and hope for a functional system?
Thank you for showing with discipline, my brother. The one at the back?
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Mnasham Taza. My question, first of all, Professor, say, how do you intend to make knowledge accessible to the less privileged people? Because as we know, first of all, the book is quite expensive. And there was a lady who also mentioned about the issue of putting information on TikTok and so on. But we know that as Africa, we are facing a challenge of electricity, we are facing a challenge of data. So how do you intend to make information accessible to those who are less privileged so that they can know or get access to the proper information that we are actually writing about in the book. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'll look in the middle. Okay, we have two gentlemen. Start with you, three now. 1, 2, 3, yeah, and 4, and Tlantla, yeah. So you 4, yes. We'll start right at the back. The gentleman who's as smart as you are, sir. Right at the back, yeah. No, you. The one with the blue jacket.
All right, thank you, Professor. I think one of the facts that we spoke about is...
Just a request for your name.
Oh, name is Lesego Nzima. And I guess I want to go with reference to what we spoke about. Looking at the American economy, 3,000 billionaires or billion-dollar companies, is the biggest question for Africa is facing growth in a low-growth African economy. Businesses are there, but the economy is low-growing. And how do we mitigate that going forward to stimulate the economy that these small SMMEs can have an atmosphere or an environment to be able to expand beyond expectations?
Thank you, sir. The gentleman, yes.
My name is Fungai Ruwende. Arthur is a long-term friend and classmate at University of Zimbabwe. The question I have to you, Arthur, is should we have another GNU to reset ourselves in Zimbabwe and come up and implement those ideas that are running through your book? It seems the GNU informed a lot of the stuff you read and the ideas you write in the book. And I think I speak to most Zimbabweans, they would agree that the GNU years were maybe some of the best years in our country. So should we have another GNU? Sorry about that, Kasukuwere.
Yes. Okay. And that.
Okay, thanks, Brian. I want to ask Prof on 2 questions. The first one, I think...
You still have your name.
Oh, my name is Marshall. Marshall, thanks. I thought you know me, but it's fine. The issue is of the GNU. I still believe that the GNU was an illegal outcome because the people voted, they never voted for GNU. It was either ZANU, MKD, there was nothing called GNU. So I think the problem that we have now, they emanate from the GNU. The Zimbabweans, they never voted for GNU. They never consulted for the referendum whether to approve that GNU. It was imposed. So I don't believe in the issue of the GNU as a success or as something that should applaud and say, we achieved this and that, because it was a more of a dictatorship to the people of Zimbabwe. Number 2, you spoke about billionaires in Africa. Prof, do you agree with me that from your 30-something, we've got no billionaires with any innovation in Africa? It's either billionaires from political connections or concoctions, if I'm to say, for a better way to say. We don't have a billionaire. I was very, 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 very disappointed when there was Elon Musk. I know there was this guy from China, should be check something.
Jack Ma.
When he came here and he met Motsepe and the other ones, and even Dangote, there's no innovation that Motsepe has ever done, except that he has got links to Robben Island. So I don't think with such leadership in Africa, we are going nowhere. We don't have billionaires in Africa if we were to speak of innovation and new ideas or thought leadership. So in a way, any political formations in the future, it should give a space for the young people and give an opportunity for people to be able to organically become billionaires without any constraints. I won't touch on
no, your minute,
Uncle Mutumwa.
Your minute
because,
is up.
Okay, fine. Last one. On Uncle Mutumwa, I know he is a rich man, but I don't know his innovation. That stresses me a lot. So the only way for me to be rich is either to go to Robben Island or to make noise, be beaten, be arrested. And then, that's...
Or to know Mutumwa.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, thanks, bye.
So let's go to the gentleman. Introduce yourself.
My name is Nhlanhla. Thanks, Professor, for... I haven't had the opportunity to read through the book, but I will certainly do. I was just wondering, to what extent do such initiatives take us deeper into understanding the workings of our government and what transpires behind the walls given the Official Secrets Act. We know, I mean, we're encouraging some of your colleagues to publish. At what risk? We know that this has also been flagged out by this government spokesperson, Charamba. When any one of the former public officials want to go out, I mean, to go public about certain matters, you will say it's 25 years. So are we not reading something that is scratching the surface? Is it a deep dive? Is it not the reason why Ino Sinkala actually said, publish when I die?
Thank you, sir. I'll take unfortunately, the new hands, because I have to come here. There was a gentleman right at the back and another one right at the back. I'm sorry, middle section. Let me see this side, I'll see. Yeah, right at the back, sir.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you, Prof. Mutambara, for always encouraging us as Africans to write. I think
Your
that's
name, sir?
Oh, the name is Tatenda Mkwedea. Thank you, Prof, for always encouraging us as Africans to write. But I think writing is just half of the story. I think the other story is, the other side of the equation is about how do we debate, how do we discuss these particular issues that we're writing, because the process of writing usually happens in these ivory towers, like where we are right now in launching your book. The other side of the equation is how do the peasants in Mutambara village, how do the disenfranchised, the marginalized engage and debate these ideas? So I want to find out from you, when are you going to do the launch in Mutambara village? In Lumpane, Filabusi, in Janja, where I come from, because that is important. Taking a leaf from Frantz Fanon distinguishes between traditional intellectuals and radical intellectuals. I would like to believe that you want to be a radical intellectual who identifies with the subaltern, with the marginalized. Your ideas, it's half of the story. They are meaningless if we are always engaging these issues in these ivory towers. Let's get to the ground, to the marginalized, to the subaltern, and engage and debate these ideas with them. So I'm looking forward to the invite. This launch in Mutambara village. I think that would be nice. It would be a nice touch.
Thank you, sir, for encouraging Arthur to be a radical intellectual from Oxford.
Thank you. My name is Cliff Shoniwa. A question for the Prof and not having read the book. You're talking about searching for the elusive Zimbabwean dream. We have 3 gentlemen here who were part of the system when this so-called dream slipped out of our hands. Do you acknowledge in the book that a good place to start would be acknowledging the role and the parts that were played by the system in leading us to where we are today?
Thank you, sir. But you are saying that it slipped in the hands of Zhuwao and Kasukuwere. Okay, I hear you.
Thank you, Prof. My name is Ray Mariga. So my first question, Prof, was how long did it take you to get to the book, and what are the triggers to those who would want actually to follow the same path of line? Because it's always tricky to say, when do you say this is the right time to start and do it? Thank you.
Okay, these are the very nice, mild questions. I've never seen people who are so nice. There was a gentleman right in the center. You, sir. Can you be quick, the 2 of you, so that we can get the Prof to answer? Prof, we'll give you 7 minutes to answer. You can't answer all, though. Yeah.
I'm Roderick Zengen. My question pertains to the fact that we are in the we are talking of the 4th Industrial Revolution, and we are in the digital age. How come then that our books are not accessed on online platforms so that they can be accessed with better ease? Number 2, how come we don't have audio books so that those who cannot, who do not have enough time to read can listen to the books? Number 3, our books are not found also in South African libraries and South African bookshops. Do you have a plan or an idea to solve that? Thank you.
Okay, so we have the gentleman and the sister here. Gentleman in the back and the sister here.
Thank you so mumuch. My name is Kotatso Lamola.
since World War II, the US dollar has been gaining dominance in terms of the global reserve currency. My question is to you, Professor, what do you think about the rise of de-dollarization, of course, with regards to focusing specifically in Africa? And number two, do you think that if more African countries join multi-governmental organizations like BRICS, can free themselves from the US hegemony? Thank you.
Okay. The gentleman in the back, then we come to you, madam. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Brian, and congratulations to the Prof for writing. I think it's important that as Africans we write our stories. Two quick questions, Prof. The first one is, having been a student leader and part of the pro-democracy movement in Zimbabwe for a very long time, and especially that we have had the National Constitutional Assembly from 1997, do you believe that the constitution-making process we had in 2013 was indeed people-driven? I hear Patrick talks about it was a good thing that you must emphasize. We had someone who was killed in Bare. Across the country, if you attended the public hearings, they felt like war zones where ZANU-PF people and MDCT people have been coached on what to say. Really total closure of democratic space for citizens to give their views. I want to hear your thoughts on whether you think it was a genuinely people-driven process. Then the second question, Prof, is by these launches and the writing of the books, are you planning to come back into possibly targeting the higher office now?
Kasukuwere didn't raise his head. Someone is encouraging Ago to take another plunge. Madam.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Professor, and to the panelists. My name is Ikumile Gada. My quick one is, what are the 2 or 3 personal failures that you can honestly reflect on and share during your period in the GNU? And this is not failures that could be blamed on the system, but your own personal failures. Thank you.
I came past here. Yeah, let's have him respond. It's because we really do need people to go. Arthur, this is you have many questions. What I suggest is that I don't think that the pressure is to answer all of them. Some of them are related. I would suggest, by the powers vested in me, start with the last question.
Okay, I've got about 18 questions, but I'll try to be very judicious and save time. Personal failures. I failed. We failed, but I was part of the failure in terms of political reforms. I was the principal, together with Tsvangirai, would have done more to bring about political reforms. So I take that as personal failure on the political reforms. Second failure, we didn't think about the post-GNU. These other guys were very clever. They said, okay, let these fools run on the economy, work on the economy. We're going to offload them in 2013. So we were not strategic in terms of what after. What are we going to do after the GNU? So I take that as personal failure because we had no plan beyond the GNU. Whereas the ZANU guys were very clever. They allowed BT and us to fix the economy, and they were busy working on the politics. Come 2013, they offloaded us. And they went on their own. Unfortunately, for some of them, there was a coup d'etat. But, so political reforms, lack of planning for life after the GNU. Now, we must allow some of our best minds to run countries. So when we say ideas versus power, the Chinese, when you look at those 9 men, they should be women, but they're 9 for now, men, in what is called the Politburo Standing Committee. They're engineers, about 7 engineers. And I'm an engineer, but I'm not biased. So the Chinese, in their own perverted way, are allowing some of their best minds to run China. We are allowing our dimwits, our content-free people to run countries. When you look at Lee Kuan Yew, he's a PhD from Cambridge, running Singapore. Capacity does matter. Mahathir, a medical doctor. Obama, a superstar. Hillary Clinton, very sharp. So in Africa, sometimes we have a few people who are able, but most of us are not very able. We must allow some of our best minds in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, in Ghana to run countries. External factors, of course we are clear about imperialism. Of course we are clear about the world being not fair. But you see, let's start with things that we control. Does imperialism ask you or force you to kill your own people? To brutalize your own people, to be undemocratic and steal elections? So we are saying, yes, to fighting imperialism. Yes, the world is not fair, but why don't we start with things that we control? Why are you stealing in Ghana? Why are you stealing is the imperialists have asked you to steal? Maybe. But we are saying yes to fighting imperialism, yes to fighting hegemony from the West, but charity begins at home. Democracy, it's a means to an end. Why don't we use democracy to solve our problems? It's the fairer way to run countries. But it's not an end in itself, it's a means to an end. That's why we need to think about the economic vision, the economic strategy. It's not enough to have free and fair elections. Parties must have programs, so when they do win elections, they can run countries effectively. So yes, we must not worship democracy. Democracy must be understood as a means to an end. We must break down this work into Twitter, into TikTok, because our young people have a very short attention span. So we write, but we also go on to do the smaller versions and the pictures and the videos to capture more people and make it more accessible. Growth, yes, we must have economic growth, but be very careful. We must not have jobless economic growth. The growth must create jobs. But more importantly, why don't you train our young people to be entrepreneurs? When you're done with your program at UP, done with your program at UCT, at UJ, why don't you become a job creator, a creator of businesses? So job creation and making sure our skills are appropriate. The training at UJ, the training at UCT, at UP, are you producing the capabilities and skills that the industry requires? There must be a meeting of the minds between the academy and industry. The GNU, no, we must have elections, free and fair elections. So our starting point right now, Brian, Ruende, my classmates, we must make sure we have free and fair elections in Zimbabwe. The voters' roll must be accessible. The voters' roll must not be shambolic. Opposition leaders must be removed from prison. Opposition people must be able to organize. Once we have a free and fair election, there will be winners and losers. And the losers will be able to congratulate the winners and we have a new government. If there's a failure, a hung parliament, then we can have a negotiation and then have, an inclusive government. Or if the winners, in their generosity, say, we want to put Zimbabwe first. We have won these elections, but we want to reach out to civil society, reach out to the opposition, reach out to business, and create a government of national unity. Then we can have a GNU. But we can't have a GNU as an agenda. Let us have free and fair elections. Mugabe in 1980 got 57 out of 80. He could have formed a government on his own. But he was very wise, unlike Mnangagwa, who is blind, deaf, and dumb. Mnangagwa is foolish because after the coup, he had an opportunity to take advantage of the goodwill around the coup d'etat and create an inclusive government, create an arrangement where he could harness the goodwill and drive Zimbabwe forward. Mugabe did that. He could have run the government. No, he brought Nkomo in, he brought Smith in, and formed the government of national unity in 1980 so that he could consolidate. Of course, he was being Machiavellian because the time he was hitting on his colleagues with Gukura Hundi. He was chasing out the Smith people. But he was clever to bring people together at the beginning. You know what he says to me? It's in the book. When I got in, I decided to bring in Anderson, Norman, all these people came in, George Smith, into his government. He asked Smith to do that, but Smith was going to give him people. So no, I will choose the people. Just allow me to do that. So he chose these people. The first Secretary of Cabinet was white. His executive assistant was white. General Rhodes was in charge. That's what we call being smart, to consolidate so that you can harness on the goodwill of independence. You know, every Monday, Mugabe would meet up with Smith. Cabinet is Tuesday. Every Monday, he would meet up with Smith. Smith, what can we do? Smith. And he only stopped when Smith started boasting. Oh, this Mugabe guy knows nothing. I tell him everything on Monday. But you see the shrewdness of Robert Mugabe. Smith was their enemy. But he was smart enough to, I'm a teacher, I don't know about running a country, I can learn from this man. And he was meeting this man every Monday. It's in the book. So again, I'm saying, look, if Chamisa becomes president, he can, on his own, reach out and pick up ZANU people and form a government. If Mnangagwa wins, which I doubt, he can also bring in people from the other side. But we can't have the GNU as a target. It can come after the election by negotiation or by leadership. The GNU was illegal. You need to read. Where's the chap? That's why we read, Brian. These guys don't read. Read book 2. The GNU was not illegal. There was a hung parliament. Mugabe could not run the country on his own. Tsvangirai could not do it. Look at book number 2. It explains very clearly. It was forced upon us by circumstances of a hung parliament. No one could run the country. Tsvangirai could not do it. I'm looking at the official results. I know he was rigged against. But the official results from 2008, no one could do it on their own. Brother Tsvangirai could not run the country on his own because Mugabe had taken the presidency. And Mugabe could not run the country on his own. Parliament was divided. Between our MDC and MZT, we controlled parliament. So it was not illegal. It was a creature of necessity. Although I thought you were going to say you were outgunned, you were outsmarted, then you had a better point. Because actually, you know what, Sipo? Morgan should have become president and Mugabe prime minister. You know why? Who won the real election? The first election, Tsvangirai was ahead. Although he didn't get 50%, he was ahead of Mugabe. Right? That's the only bona fide election. The runoff was a sham. Was a sham. So when we negotiated, we were negotiating from the point of one bona fide election where Tsvangirai was ahead. So whatever we did, and this is another failure, by the way, guilty as charged. We should have produced a GNU where Morgan Tsvangirai was president, Mugabe prime minister. Use deputy prime minister. Mine was not a problem. And you know what? Actually, you know why we didn't know how much power we had. There was a meeting of the African heads of states. By the way, the AU and SADC did not recognize the runoff. Kasukuwere and Zhuwao. That runoff was never recognized by the AU and the SADC. You know, in a meeting, Mugabe was told off by Museveni, by Kagame, everybody and their grandmother told him off. And he was very furious. He said to Kagame, you rig elections in Rwanda. How dare you call me a dictator? And then Kiketwe came and said, my brother, take it easy, my brother. In my village, if you are discovered as a thief at the market, and people are running after you as a thief, you can't tell them, oh no, there's another thief over there. For today, my brother Mugabe, you are our thief. Forget about Melez, who is also a thief. Forget about Kagame. Today, you are our thief. Take it easy. That's when Mugabe came out and told that guy, he shouted obscenities against a journalist. He was ruffled. Which means we had so much, we didn't know, we had so much power because Mugabe's presidency was not accepted by SADC, was not accepted by the AU. So if we were clever, which we were not, we could have actually made Tsvangirai president. But anyway, it's always called 2020 vision after the fact. So the GNU was not illegal. Please read, my brother. That's why I write, to educate you. The billionaire issue is not mine, it's Kuseni. I never talk about billionaires. It's Kuseni who talk about billionaires, but I can say that don't be rough on our billionaires. There are some proper ones, like Strive Masiwa. He's a proper billionaire. You use Echo Cash and Echo, that's him. Dangote is a proper one. The problematic one is yours here. This Cyril Ramaphosa, that's not a billionaire proper. What kind of billionaire uses white money to become president? What billionaire can pay the workers of his own party? What billionaire does not understand the economy? That one is bogus. But Cyril Ramaphosa, Strive Masiwa is a proper one. Don't be too harsh on your own brothers and sisters. But the billionaire question is not mine, it's yours, Kuseni. You can deal with it. Mutumwa, don't be harsh on Mutumwa, man. He might be useless now, but he formed some companies. He formed some companies. Please, guys, go into your history. Africa Resource Limited. SMM, please. No, let's not be harsh on the brother. He had his good days. I mean, they're gone, but...
Yes, Lotto.
Now, who is talking about Official Secrets Act? You carry out a coup d'etat. What bigger violation of the Constitution is a coup d'etat? How can a coup d'etat beneficiary talk about Official Secrets Act? Mnangagwa is president because of a coup d'etat. Chiwenga is vice president because of a coup d'etat. George Charamba is somebody because of a coup d'etat. They have no local standing. They have no moral authority to talk about official secret. So write, Zhuwao, don't worry, write whatever you want. Please don't try to use these tricks. A beneficiary of a coup d'etat talks about law. What law? A beneficiary of a coup d'etat talks, don't break the law. We lock yourself up. Kasukuwere, you hear me? And also think about it, Churchill. Talking about Churchill was asked, he lost the elections after the Second World War. Mr. Churchill, how is history going to judge you? Churchill said, very positively, because I'm going to write the history. And Churchill's got 2 volumes of the Second World War. And he got the files of the cabinet. They felt sorry for him, and they gave him all the files. He was able to document and write about the Second World War. History will be very generous to me, that's Churchill, because I'm going to write it. So please, let's allow our practitioners to share. Don't allow George Charamba. You know, I joked with Mugabe in the book. George Charamba was in Form 6 when I was in Form 1 at Hatso. So in the book I said to Mugabe, look at this boy here, Mugabe. He's called George Charamba. He was in Form 6 when I was in Form 1. He thinks nothing has changed. I'm the Deputy Prime Minister. He's your sycophant. He doesn't realize that he's no longer Form 6 and a Form 1. I'm the Deputy Prime Minister. You're Mugabe's sycophant. And Mugabe was like, oh, that's an interest. And I'm saying, George Charamba cannot stop you from writing. You must write. Write, then debate. Very important. We must write these ideas, we must debate them, but we must implement them. So writing is the starting point, I agree. We must debate, we must implement, we must do launches in the village. I'll be in the village, I'll be in Mutambara. You know, you're preaching to the choir. I'm converted, I've been doing what you're talking about. So I'm sure you like preaching, but you're preaching to the choir. We are very clear on the role of ZANU in the destruction of Zimbabwe. We are very clear on the role of Robert Mugabe in the destruction of Zimbabwe. I'm very crude and vicious in my book. I'm very clear on the role of Mugabe in terms of tribalism. For 37 him and Rex established a Zulu hegemony in Zimbabwe. I talk about it in my book. I'm very clear on the role of Mugabe and ZANU in the destruction of Zimbabwe. It's there. What's said is that in terms of tribalism, in terms of incompetence, in terms of corruption, we've jumped from the pan into the fire with Emerson Mnangagwa. He's a clansman, a tribalist who is crude. Mugabe had finesse, a bit of sophistication, but still a tribalist who did Gukura Hundi. There's no finesse there. But I'm just saying this one is not educated. So he's crude. My wife is health ambassador. My sons run the country. They're in every sector in the country. Gold mafia. I'm sure you watched that. So we are very clear on the role of ZANU, Zhuwao, your party. I mean, you left, but your party, Kasukuwere, destroyed the country. And I don't miss my words on that, in the book. How to write, I mean, just start. Be motivated. Know that it's part of your legacy. When you are gone, how are you going to be remembered? Zobo used to say, when I read my book, to be volume 1, volume 2. He's gone, there's nothing. Ngala said, I'll publish when I die. He's dead, where's the book? He was lying. I'll publish when I die. He wrote nothing. President Mugabe, I tried. You don't have to like President Mugabe, by the way. 51, he graduates out of Fort Hare. He teaches in Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Ghana. He comes back in 1960, he joins the struggle to 2017. From 1960 to 2017, Robert Mugabe has a front seat in the history of Zimbabwe. But he goes away, not even a single pamphlet. Not a pamphlet. I did 5 years, Kagoro, I got 3 volumes. Doing all right. But can you imagine what we lost from 1951, Fort Hare, to 2017? That's a lot of information. In the book, I talk about this with him. I say, Mr. President, you must write a book. Your enemies will buy 2 copies. You'll be a proper millionaire, not a dubious one like this one. So what do you do? Like your money is stolen money. When you write a book, you'll be millionaire proper. He was a bit agitated, but he understood I was right. His enemies would have bought 2 volumes of the same book just to try to understand Robert Mugabe. But goes away without a pamphlet. Don't be like that. Write something. There's no time to start, anytime. Keep your pictures. Keep your pictures so that you can document nicely, and keep a diary. Keep a diary, and you can start writing. And then, of course, we need to make things accessible. E-book, oh yeah, the book is on Amazon, although we have another version. The book is on Amazon. There's also what's called POD, print on demand. If you go on Amazon, you find that book and order it, it will be printed as you want it. However, because it's so thick, it comes in 2 parts, part 1 and part 2 of the same book. So it's available online as a print on demand. Part 1 and part 2 of the book. E-book is there, you can just do an electronic one. But then it is important for us also to do the audio. And South African bookstores is coming into all these bookstores. In other words, access is important, distribution is important, and we're working on that. At the moment, the book is there on Amazon in 2 versions, POD and e-book. De-dollarization is very important. We must not be dependent on America. The question on external forces came up. We can't be too dependent on the Americans. We must be able to say, why don't we work together in the global south? The BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and Africa in there. And by the way, South Africa, you don't belong to the BRICS, you're too small. You're not a BRIC, South Africa. Go with Africa, then you become a proper BRIC. You're too small, don't play it big when you are a Mickey Mouse economy. The only way South Africa can be a BRIC is if they go as the African Continental Free Trade Area. 1.4 billion Africans, $2.5 trillion GDP. That's a member of the BRIC, not South Africa, the little Mickey Mouse economy. They don't belong to the BRICS. 2013 Constitution. Listen, in the book, I do an analysis of that Constitution. I look at the strengths, I look at the weaknesses. I reference Professor Maduku, who was in the NCA, Mndarazi Gwisai, ISO. I do an analysis of the positives and the negatives. The strengths are that at least you had 3 political parties working together. That makes it party-centric. Ideally, we'd want it to be people-driven, where the parties are not dominating. So our downside, the 3 parties, MDC, MDCT, and ZANU-PF were dominating. That's not the greatest way of doing it. It would have been better to be driven by civil society, by the population, but having the 3 of them being the big parties in the country was a plus. But in the book, I provide a critique, the strengths and the weaknesses, and I reference Professor Maduku because he was very critical of the process. ISO, Gwisai were also critical, so I talk about that. Higher office, I don't need, I'm already in high office. What are you talking about? I'm the director. Is that so? I'm the director at the Institute of the Future of Knowledge. I'm a full professor, not a quarter or half, a full professor. I'm not sure about high office. Maybe, if Kasukuwere, Chamisa, and Mnangagwa don't solve the problems, then I'm coming through. you Kasukuwere, Chamisa, and Mnangagwa, get your act together. Otherwise, I'll come in as a competitor and take your lunch from you. Post-GNU, I've answered the question of personal failures. Am I going to get another chance or this is it? Okay, no problem. I want to finish on my usual note. I know some of you are kind of skeptical of politics. You think you are sophisticated. I'm a superstar journalist. I'm a superstar CEO. I'm a chairman of Massmart. I'm a professor of rocket science. You are rocket science nothing. As long as South Africa has not done well as a country, you are no rock star, Kuseni. You'll be judged by the success or lack of it of South Africa. When you go to Davos, which I know you do go to Davos, like I used to rock up there as well, they'll say, Kuseni, you are the chairman of Massmart. You are the former CEO of Old Mutual. You are a Rhodes scholar. But where are you from? I'm from South Africa with load shedding. What is going on in South Africa? There's no drinkable water in South Africa. What kind of rock star are you who has stage 100 load shedding? So he will never be respected. A Silk, a senior counsel, he's going to be judged very soon, that chap. He's going to be judging you, Mutumwa, when you get into trouble. He's going to be judged. Judge Mooki, advocate, you'll never be respected as long as there's chaos in Soweto, because they'll judge you by the success or lack of it of Soweto. You have a duty and obligation to fix Soweto. The same applies to Kuseni with your many chairmanships. It happened to me. It's personal here. Because I used to go to Davos and I used to talk smart. They say, we like what you're saying. You look very clever. Where are you from? I refuse to answer. I say, I'm coming out of MIT. I'm from McKinsey. And I'm also from NASA. I have a PhD from Oxford. No, we know all that. Where are you from, brother? Then I refuse to answer. Where are you from? Then eventually I say, I'm from Zimbabwe. Oh, no, come on. You're from Zimbabwe and you think you are smart. If you are that smart, how come your country is messed up? If you are that smart, what about the gold mafia? You will never be respected as a Zimbabwean until Zimbabwe has done well as a country. You will never be respected as an African until Africa has done well as a continent. Even this actor here, this superstar Mutumwa, they look at him and say, you are South African. There's load shedding 100 here. Zimbabwe, where you came from, is ruined. So what kind of rock star is that? Whereas when Bill Gates rocks up, oh yeah, he's come from the United States. Yeah, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and all these guys, they are respected. So take it personally, people. I don't care what you're doing. In your own small way, try to fix your country. In your own small way, try to fix the continent. I thank you so very much.
You know, Jackie, yeah, I mean, you know, we used to have something called University Bachelors Association, UBA. And you know, the behavior, I learned in my village that they say you can't be a crocodile elsewhere if you are a lizard in your own village. Thank you, Professor, for reminding us that no matter how big we are or we become elsewhere, as long as we are lizards in our own villages. And I learned as I listened to the eminent panel, first my brother Walter, Kuseni, Kasukuwere, Advocate Tambu, Sipo, that I was told, Jackie, a proverb in a saying in Morocco, that let's be like trees that shed their leaves with each season but never change their roots. That it is important to have very deep roots. I also, as I reflected on the interventions by by Dr. Janet Patrick, Tony, and Mutumwa, was reminded of the dangers of becoming 9,000 kilometers wide and 1 inch deep. Arthur, I must tell you this, when you say you must train your young people to be entrepreneurs, my brother Siposam Malunga and I used to work at the UN. We had some fancy big titles. On Youth Day, as I have been doing for the last 28 years, I brought young people together, and in the audience, one of the young people was talking about we don't have jobs for young people. So one of my colleagues in the UN, one of the senior economists, said, "You young people, why are you talking about jobs? You must be talking about entrepreneurship." Then the young man calmly says, "Sir, if this entrepreneurship works, why are you still in full-time employment?" I mean, that surely, why are you teaching entrepreneurship? Why are you not doing it? Why are you in the UN getting a paycheck? I think part of the problem is that we have the right words. I think what you were saying to us, Arthur, and what Kuseni you say to us, we have to model that change. We have arrived at that generation where, for the most part, those who spoke today, we are the elders. Right? We're now the elders. It's a very frightening thing in our 50s and so on and so on. Tatenda, unfortunately, you've joined the elders, you and Tambu. Then the second thing is that there was a story, a true story actually. A governor in Nigeria had stolen 50 million naira, Jackie, and hid it in the house. So the police or the crimes unit went, found money, and this guy insisted on defending himself. He didn't want a lawyer. So the lawyers, and you know, I'm sorry, advocate, you know, the pomp and ceremony with which the legal fraternity conducts itself in saying simple things like you stole. You know, they'll cite a verse, a chapter, just to simply say, natif, or you stole, right? So the lawyers, the prosecution led a very solid case. And this guy was asked to defend himself. So he asked the chief prosecutor, now, Mr. Prosecutor, you dare say I stole government money? The prosecutor says, yes, of course, you know you did. I said, Mr. Prosecutor, where did you find this money? So he says, we found it at your house. He says, what is the place where you find the money? He says, Governor's Mansion. So I said, Mr. Prosecutor, who owns Governor's Mansion? He says, of course, the federal government. He said, Mr. Prosecutor, what is wrong with finding government money in government house? So you have to understand that when you start talking about definitions of things, it gets very complex. Yeah? And obviously, Kasukuwere and my Mzukuru will know some comrades who came from the war. And one of those comrades, a relation of mine, who's prominent. I don't want to violate the Patriots' Bill. People used to live in small houses, Jackie, before I call you. And he had built a massive house. Massive house. So the comrades came. You remember there was a leadership code. You couldn't own more than 50 acres of land. That guy had a massive house. So the comrades came and said, but comrade, you have a 50-acre house. He says, no. You see what we have to do. Because it's unsafe when the comrades leave after meetings and they have to travel at night. We built a big house, a big enough house so that the comrade can sleep over. So primitive accumulation amongst the nationalist elite was always defended, not as a form of creating wealth or transformation or shared economy, but as some benign thing. I think people were so guilty to say we are making money for the sake of becoming wealthy. They always had to excuse the wealth and the primitive accumulation. So even in Harare now, a guy who buys a Lamborghini and becomes a Mbinga excuses it as some form, it has something to do with the revolution, with fighting against sanctions. Where they say, I said, these are good sanctions if you need a Bugatti to fight them. And then the last story I'll tell you is about power cuts. I saw Trevor. Trevor, I saw you. So, you know, in Zimbabwe, they used to have these power cuts where the guys would come and disconnect power from the top. Huh? Do you remember those days, Kasukuwere? They would disconnect. They would go up the pole to disconnect. So there was a guy who had a hacksaw. So these guys had come to disconnect power in the local area. So he went up to go and disconnect Mutumwa. So one local bouncer came with a hacksaw and said, Bambo, oh, if you cut, I cut. And remember how tall those poles are. So the guy who was at the top started bleeding. He says, no, you can't do that. He says, and you can't do that too. And I think that's what Arthur says in the book about balancing out the power of the people and the assumed power of the elite. They want to cut, you have to say, if you cut, we cut. And the occasion to do the cut is coming very soon. I'm not sure elections will solve the system issues, because even Jacqueline, who's an institution, and you know, in doing the introductions, I have to be very careful because I have never really called you Jackie Mtambaras. But today I must do so because I think my friendship with Arthur has to be maintained. Because Jackie's doctorate was before Arthur, and this attempt to appropriate Jackie is unbelievable. But I think that in order, what God has joined, let no book launch separate. I was at their wedding, and at the time my friend and I had, my friend had always hoped that I would marry Jackie's, some friend of Jackie's. Jackie didn't know this. He was totally conspiring. As you know, I have come as that young brother at all the book launches. It's not that we agree. It's simply that we have over the years learned to tolerate each other. First time Arthur called me for a meeting, it was at a Thai restaurant in Sandton. And his words were, "Andafunga kutonga." It was way before, it was way before, what's his name, Scala made him president. It was way, way before. He's yet to say sorry to me because when he was at the Bulawayo Congress, I didn't know this was happening. He phoned me, I was in Nairobi. He says, so, comrade, what do you think? And I said, that's a bad idea. The guy didn't tell me he was giving his accepted speech. So Dr. Jackie is the CEO at the Africa Leadership Institute, a board member of Econet Wireless Zimbabwe, Advocacy, and One Campaign. One is a global campaign organization. Jackie has not only been a life partner to Arthur and a mother to their wonderful, wonderful, intelligent. I hear you are going now away to university. I think what Jackie has been is the real force. Arthur is simply ungovernable. Arthur is simply, sorry, I know he's your father. He's simply chaotic. But Arthur is also an extremely, you know, there's a very interesting thing. Those of you who know, it's a very caring and loving person. So between the volatility, sometimes the caustic humor nature, is a brother, a patriot, a Pan-Africanist who cares. But this may be lies that we tell Jackie ourselves. The guy may be something totally monstrous elsewhere. You are the only one who's seen him asleep, except Kasukuwere and Zhuwao and Mzembi, occasionally in cabinet. You've also the only one who's seen him when he's totally down. You've seen him when the energies are not running this high. We see him, I used to call him Duracell. right? He always has endless energy like that battery. So Jackie, beyond thanking us, it may be useful because you've walked a long journey with our comrades. To you, he's not Deputy Prime Minister, he's not Chief Mutambara. This is what we men, bigoted, egocentric males do to make ourselves, when we don't have power, Patrick, to feel good. We call each other Chief Mambo, and we rule over nothing. Check.
Good evening. Sorry, I'm just so relieved that there was a Q&A session between me and Mr. Mawere because he's a very hard act to follow. So the whole time he was talking, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to say after this? So thank you for the Q&A between us. So as we reach the end of our program, I'd like to thank our speakers and Brian for chairing this so expertly and in a fun way, as you always do. I'd also like to thank you all for coming through tonight and supporting this third launch of the trilogy. I actually remember when this idea was first discussed, the idea of writing 3 books. There was a lot of discouragement as well from friends who just thought it was crazy. Like, why do you need 3 books? You know, Churchill has probably got 1 book. Chairman Mao has got 1 book. Why does Arthur Mutambara need 3 books? You know, but I think from tonight you've realized that we're dealing with a larger-than-life character who needs 3 books. So thank you for coming through. It seemed an impossible idea. It seemed very ambitious, so it's really hard for me to believe that we've actually reached the end of the trilogy. I had the very important but challenging role of being the editor. And I say challenging because I'm also a natural diplomat, so you can see our personalities. That's where the challenge is. So I would also be trying to tone down the language, and Arthur would be upping the ante. Then you go on to track changes. You're like, no, you don't need to call them minions. You can just call them representatives. And minions comes back in, you know. So it's a constant tug of war. I never win, so I gave up, you know. So you know, I can't moderate the language to that extent, but that was always the fight in the editing. It is a very vast book. It's very expansive in terms of the issues that it deals with and the time frame that it covers. So everything from the GNU to the constitutional changes to the AFCFTA, which is currently ongoing, to regional integration issues, to ChatGPT, to artificial intelligence. So it's very wide and varied. And I think part of the reason why it's so wide and varied is because he writes on issues as they happen. So it's quite a unique way of writing a biography because I think traditionally they're written retrospectively. So as he mentioned, it's very modular. So each chapter expresses a thought in its entirety. So you can pick up any chapter, there's no continuation. Each one is a standalone idea. So, but the key message is, I think, beyond what is contained in the book, I think the most important message is that we need to document our stories. So we started off with, Brian said, I was brought up on an oral tradition, and I think as Africans, oral tradition is what distinguishes us from other cultures, but I really don't think it's something to be proud of, not in 2023. We can't rely on oral traditions because you know what happens. Your grandfather tells the story, it's passed down, it gets watered down, it gets butchered, it gets edited, it changes along the way. Right? So I think when you know better, you do better. So I'd like to believe all of us in this room know better. So we should do better. So I'm challenging you all tonight to begin to write your stories, to begin to put your perspectives on paper. It doesn't matter how well it gets sold or whether it doesn't sell, whether it sells or not, but the important thing is that it's written down for posterity and for future generations. Thank you very much. Thank you.
When Jackie talks about oral tradition and distortion, I was told a story. This is not a reflection of my gender politics. A guy's sweetheart used to make chicken, but before she used to tie it with a drawstring before putting it in a rotisserie. And then their husband asked, sweetie, why do you tie the chicken before you put it in the oven? So the wife says, I don't know. My mother used to do that. So they go and ask the mother, so, Mommy, why did you used to tie the chicken before you put it in the oven? So the mother is like, I don't know. My mom used to do that. So they go to the grandmother and say, why did you used to tie the chicken before you put it in the oven? The grandmother says, no, you know, the old ovens were so small the chicken would not fit in. So, my friends, the book is available at the back. The book is available at the back. All the other 4 books by Professor Mutambara are available. Please do not rush back. Arthur is not only Anglophile, he is a good Christian person, but between you and I, it's really Jackie. What has been agreed, there is a buffet dinner afterwards. So we know that you didn't have enough time to go and cook. Please stay for the buffet dinner. Let the author sign copies of the book that you will have bought. Please buy as many as possible. Buy for friends. And those of you who really wanted to argue with the panelists, here is your opportunity, once in a lifetime. And please, afterwards, be like that woman who wrote a book, Dinner with Mugabe, after spending a few moments with Mugabe, right? And Zhuwao, Patrick, and SK, shame on you. This woman had less than an hour with the late Mugabe, wrote a book, Dinner with Mugabe. So, my friends, please take Tyson, and then you can say Dinner with Kasukuwere, best-selling book. Buy the book, and let's go. Thank you for coming. God bless you.
The University of Johannesburg, the future reimagined.